Hello everyone, welcome back to Midnight Lullaby. I know many of you are here to drift gently into sleep. Before you close your eyes, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel. I'd also love to hear from you in the comments. Let me know where in the world you're listening from. Now, turn off the lights, get comfortable, and let the story carry you into dreams. The rain began exactly at midnight. I remember because I was watching the clock on my phone when the first drop hit the windshield. My car had died 3 blocks from home, engine clicking uselessly when I turned the key. The street was empty, shops shuttered, their windows reflecting nothing but darkness and the occasional flicker of a dying street lamp. That's when I saw the phone booth. It stood on the corner like a relic from another era, one of those old-fashioned red ones you only see in photographs now. Strange that I'd never noticed it before, despite walking this road countless times. The glass panels gleamed wetly under the rain, catching light that seemed to come from nowhere. Inside, I could see the phone hanging from its metal cord, waiting. My cell phone was dead. Of course it was. I needed to call someone, anyone, to help with the car. My apartment was close, but not close enough to walk in this downpour. The phone booth beckoned like a lighthouse in the storm. The door creaked when I pulled it open, a sound that seemed too loud in the empty street. Inside, the air was different, warmer, somehow, and carrying a faint scent I couldn't quite place. Copper, maybe, or rust. The phone receiver felt smooth against my palm, surprisingly warm for metal in the rain. I lifted it to my ear. The dial tone was wrong. Not the steady hum I expected, but something that wavered, rising and falling like breath. Like the phone booth itself was breathing. I told myself it was just old wiring, decades of neglect creating interference. I dialed my roommate's number, fingers pressing the worn buttons with mechanical clicks that echoed in the confined space. The ringing started normally enough. 2 rings. On the third, something changed. The quality of the sound shifted, became distant, as if the call was traveling much farther than the 3 blocks to my apartment. Static crept in at the edges, whispering voices that might have been cross. Talk from other lines, other conversations bleeding through. But those voices weren't speaking English. They weren't speaking anything I recognized. Hello. My roommate's voice finally came through, but it sounded strange, flat, like a recording of her voice rather than the real thing. Sarah, my car died on Maple Street. Can you come get me? I'm at. You shouldn't have answered, she said. I laughed, nervous. What? I didn't answer, I called you. The phone. You shouldn't have answered the phone. Sarah, what are you talking about? I called you on this payphone. My cell is dead. Silence filled the line, but not empty silence. Full silence, pregnant with presence. Like someone holding their breath, waiting. There's no payphone on Maple Street, Sarah said finally. That booth was torn down 10 years ago. Someone died there. My hand tightened on the receiver. That's not funny. I'm literally standing in it right now. I can see. The line went dead. Not the clean disconnect of a call ending, but a sudden, complete silence that felt like a door slamming. I pulled the phone from my ear, staring at it. The receiver was cold now, ice cold. So cold it almost burned. I should have left then. Pushed open the door and walked home in the rain. Let the water wash away whatever strangeness had crept into my mind. But the phone rang. The sound filled the booth, impossibly loud in the small space. The metal walls seemed to amplify it, turning the ringing into something physical, something that pressed against my eardrums and made my teeth ache. I watched the phone swing slightly on its cord, ringing, demanding to be answered. Don't answer it. Every instinct screamed at me to leave, but my hand was already moving. Fingers closing around the receiver, lifting it to my ear. Hello. You have 30 minutes. The voice was neither male nor female, neither young nor old. It simply was, existing in a space beyond such definitions. 30 minutes until what? Until you understand. Who is this? Is this some kind of joke? 9 minutes, 52 seconds. Listen, I don't know what. The booth knows your name. It knew you would come. It's been waiting such a very long time. Waiting for someone who would answer. I slammed the phone down, heart hammering. My breath fogged the glass panels, obscuring the street outside. When I wiped it clear, I saw the rain had stopped. The pavement was dry, completely dry, as if it had never rained at all. I pushed the door. It didn't budge. Panic fluttered in my chest like a trapped bird. I pushed harder, throwing my weight against the glass. The door remained firmly closed, though I could see no lock, no mechanism holding it shut. Through the clear panels, the street stretched empty in both directions. No cars, no people, no lights in any windows. The phone rang again. This time, I let it ring 5 times, 10, 15. The sound burrowed into my skull, hit each ring feeling like it was coming from inside my own head. Finally, unable to bear it anymore, I answered. 5 minutes. Please, I just want to leave. I need to get home. But you are home. Don't you recognize it? Look closer. I pressed my face to the glass, looking out at the familiar street. Familiar, but wrong somehow. The shops were the same. The dry cleaner, the convenience store, the Thai restaurant on the corner. But their signs were backward. Mirror images of themselves. The street lamps cast shadows in the wrong directions, pointing toward the light instead of away from it. What is this? Where am I? Where you've always been. Where you'll always be. The booth found you walking past it every day, never seeing, never knowing. But tonight you saw. Tonight you needed something, and the booth provides. Provides what? Answers. Connections. A voice in the darkness. Isn't that what you wanted? Isn't that why you've been so alone? The words hit too close. Yes, I'd been alone. Months of it. Drowning in the isolation of a city full of strangers. Sarah was barely a roommate, more like a ghost who shared the apartment. My family lived states away. Friends had drifted like smoke, dissipating into their own busy lives. That's not. I'm not alone. I have people. 20 minutes. Tell me, when was the last time someone truly heard you? Not just listened, but heard. Understood the weight of your silence, the shape of your thoughts. I didn't answer. Couldn't answer. The phone booth felt smaller now, the walls closer. I could touch both sides with my outstretched hands, could feel the cold glass against my palms. The booth hears everything. The voice continued, almost gentle now. Every call ever made here. Every secret whispered. Every lie told. Every desperate prayer. They all live in the wires, in the metal, in the glass. The booth remembers. Someone died here, I whispered. Sarah said someone died. Yes, she answered too. 10 years ago. She picked up the phone when it rang, just like you did. She listened to the voice, just like you're listening now. And when her time ran out, the line filled with static, a burst of white noise so loud I yanked the phone from my ear. When the static cleared, I heard something underneath it, screaming. Distant, muffled, but definitely screaming. And underneath that, the sound of ringing phones, dozens of them, hundreds, all ringing at once in some vast, unseen space. 15 minutes. I tried the door again, kicking at it this time. The glass didn't even shudder. My fists made no sound when I pounded against it, as if the impacts were being absorbed, swallowed by something hungry. Outside, the street remained empty. The backward signs stared at me like accusations. My phone, my dead cell phone. I pulled it from my pocket, desperate, and pressed the power button. The screen flickered to life, showing a full charge. Impossible. It had been dead when I entered the booth. But there it was, glowing cheerfully, offering escape. I dialed 911. The call connected immediately. Emergency services, what's your? You have 12 minutes, the voice said. Not an operator. The same voice from the booth's phone, coming from my cell phone. Calling for help won't change anything. The booth exists outside of that help, outside of their rules. I ended the call, hands shaking. Tried Sarah again. The same voice answered. Tried my parents, my old college roommate, the pizza place down the street. Every number connected to the same voice, patient and inevitable as death. 10 minutes. Would you like to know what happens when the time runs out? No, I said, but the word came out as barely a whisper. The booth will ring again, and this time, someone else will answer. Someone walking past, someone who needs to make a call. Someone who doesn't see the booth for what it is, and you'll be the voice they hear. Warning them, counting down their time, adding your voice to all the others trapped in the wires. I looked at the phone hanging innocently on the wall. How many voices were in there? How many people had stood exactly where I was standing, watching the minutes tick away, feeling the walls press closer? Why? My voice cracked. Why does it do this? The booth doesn't do anything. It simply is. A thin place where the barriers wear away, where connection becomes something more, something hungry. You wanted to reach out, to touch someone across the distance. The booth granted that wish. It will keep granting it, forever. 7 minutes. The temperature was dropping. I could see my breath now, great plumes of it fogging the glass. Ice was forming in the corners of the booth, delicate crystals spreading across the metal surfaces. My fingers were going numb. In the glass, I caught my reflection. But it wasn't quite right. The eyes were too dark, too deep. The smile too wide for the fear I felt. My reflection moved, slightly out of sync with my actual movements, lagging behind by a heartbeat. 5 minutes. You feel it now, don't you? The booth claiming you, making you part of itself. Soon, you won't remember what it was like to be outside. Won't remember the sun or the rain or the touch of another person. Only this. Only the waiting and the ringing and the voice counting down for the next lost soul. I pressed my back against the door, sliding down until I sat on the cold floor. My phone screen showed 12:47 a.m. 47 minutes since midnight. 47 minutes since the rain began. Had it really been that short? It felt like hours. It felt like years. 3 minutes. Is there a way out? I asked, hating the hope in my voice. There's always a way out. But you have to be willing to pay the price. What price? Someone has to answer. Someone has to take your place. If you can make someone pick up the phone in the next 3 minutes, you can leave. The booth needs a voice. It doesn't matter whose. I thought of Sarah, of the strange flatness in her voice when she answered my call. You shouldn't have answered the phone, had she been trying to warn me. Or had she been hoping, desperately hoping, that I would fall into the same trap that held her. 2 minutes. My hands were shaking as I picked up the receiver again. I could dial anyone at all. And if they answered, if they came close enough to the booth to hear its ring, I could be free. All I had to do was pass the curse along. The dial tone breathed in my ear. Waiting. 1 minute. I thought about my mother. Probably asleep 3 states away, phone on her nightstand. 1 call. That's all it would take. Or my old friend Marcus, who always answered no matter what time. Or even a random number, punching digits until someone picked up. Someone I'd never have to face. My finger hovered over the buttons. 30 seconds. The booth was so cold now. The ice had spread across every surface, turning the glass panels into frosted mirrors that showed only vague, twisted shapes. My reflection was barely human anymore, all elongated limbs and empty eyes. 15 seconds. I could feel the booth claiming me, could feel my voice beginning to slip away, preparing to join the chorus in the wires. Soon, I would be the one answering when lost souls called for help. I would be the one counting down their final minutes. 10 seconds. My finger touched the button, the number 7. Just 9 more digits and I could save myself. 5 seconds. But I couldn't do it. Couldn't condemn someone else to this frozen eternity. Couldn't pass along this terrible gift of connection that was really just another word for imprisonment. 3 seconds. I hung up the phone. 2 seconds. I closed my eyes. 1. Silence. Complete and absolute silence. I opened my eyes. The door to the phone booth stood open. Beyond it, the street was normal again. Signs facing the right direction. Street lamps casting proper shadows. Rain was falling, soft and real, pattering against the glass roof of the booth. I stumbled out onto the sidewalk, legs barely holding me. The phone booth looked ordinary now, just an old relic. Its glass streaked with grime, its phone hanging limply on its cord. I could see rust on the metal frame, graffiti scratched into the panels. How had I thought it looked pristine? My cell phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Sarah. "You okay? You never made it home." I looked at the time. 12:02 a.m., 2 minutes after midnight. I walked home in the rain, letting it soak through my clothes, grateful for the cold and the wet and the reality of it all. Sarah was waiting up, her concern normal and warm and human. She never mentioned payphones or warnings, just asked about my car. He offered to help deal with it in the morning. I didn't tell her what happened. How could I? It had only been 2 minutes. A brief nightmare, a moment of confusion. Stress and isolation playing tricks on my mind. But sometimes, late at night, my phone rings with no caller ID. And when I answer, there's just breathing on the other end. Patient breathing. Waiting. And I wonder if I really left the booth at all. Or if I'm still there, trapped in that frozen moment, already starting to forget what the sun feels like. Already learning the words I'll need to say when the next person answers the phone. "You have 30 minutes. The voice sounds like mine, but I can't be sure anymore. I can't be sure of anything except that somewhere, in some thin place where barriers wear away, a phone booth is ringing. And someone, someday will answer. Story 2. 3 a.m. has become my least favorite time. It starts with a silence. Complete, absolute silence that settles over our small town like a held breath. The usual night sounds. The distant hum of the highway. The occasional bark of a dog, the whisper of wind through the trees. All of it simply stops. For perhaps 30 seconds. Maybe a minute, there's nothing. Just this oppressive quiet that presses against my eardrums until they ache. Then comes the howling. It's not a sound I can adequately describe. Sometimes I think it's like wind screaming through a narrow canyon. Other times, it reminds me of the noise my grandmother's old pipes made, magnified 1,000 times. There are nights when it sounds almost human, like dozens of voices all crying out at once in some wordless, desperate language. But mostly, it defies comparison. It simply is, pouring out into the darkness with a volume and persistence that makes my teeth hurt. I'm sitting at my bedroom window now, waiting. It's 2:47 a.m., according to my phone, and I've already been awake for an hour. Unable to sleep, anticipation coiling in my stomach like a living thing. 13 minutes. 13 minutes until it begins. This has been happening for 43 days now. 43 consecutive nights of waking at 3 a.m. to that sound erupting from somewhere in the Garrett building across the street. The apartment complex is old, built in the 1920s. All Art Deco facades and wrought iron fire escapes that zigzagged down its face like black lightning. During the day, it looks harmless, almost quaint. But at night, especially during the howling hour, it transforms into something else entirely. I've lived in this town my whole life. Born here, grew up here, took over my father's hardware store when he retired. I know every street, every building, every family. Or I thought I did. But I realized 3 weeks ago that I couldn't name a single person who lives in the Garrett building. Couldn't recall ever seeing anyone enter or exit. The lobby lights are always on, but the windows of the apartments above remain perpetually dark. Just urban decay. My wife Michelle said when I mentioned it, "Nobody wants to live in those old buildings anymore. It's probably mostly empty." But empty buildings don't howl. 2:51 a.m. 9 minutes. I watch the building through my window. From my second-floor apartment, I have a direct view of its front facade. 7 stories of brick and stone, 12 windows per floor, all dark except for 3 on the 4th floor that show a dim, yellowish light behind their curtains. Those 3 lit windows are never in the same arrangement 2 nights in a row. Last night, they were clustered together on the left side. The night before, spread across the middle. Tonight, they form a diagonal line. I've started documenting everything. I have a notebook filled with sketches showing which windows are lit each night. Observations about the subtle changes in the building's appearance. Descriptions of the variations in the howling sound. Michelle thinks I'm becoming obsessed. She might be right. 2:55 a.m., 5 minutes. My neighbor, old Mrs. Chen from downstairs, stopped me yesterday morning. "You look tired, dear," she said. Her weathered face creased with concern. "Are you sleeping all right?" "Do you hear it?" I asked her. At night. 3 a.m. The sound from across the street. She looked at me with confusion in her eyes. "What sound, dear?" "The howling from the Garrett building. Every night at 3. She shook her head slowly. "I sleep like the dead these days. My hearing isn't what it used to be." Then she patted my arm. "You should try some chamomile tea before bed. Works wonders." But it's not just Mrs. Chen. I've asked everyone. My employees at the store, customers, people at the diner. Nobody else hears it. Or if they do, they're all pretending not to. 2:58 a.m., 2 minutes. I lean forward, my hands pressed against the cold window pane. My breath fogs the glass, and I wipe it away impatiently. The street below is empty. No cars, no people. Nothing moves in the pools of yellow light cast by the street lamps. The whole world seems to be holding its breath. There's a theory I've been developing. One I haven't shared with anyone, because it sounds insane, even inside my own head. What if the howling isn't just sound? What if it's a signal? A beacon of some kind calling to something or someone? And what if everyone else in town does hear it? But they've learned not to acknowledge it, not to speak of it, because speaking of it means admitting it's real. What if the real question isn't, why am I the only one who hears it? But why am I the only one who admits to hearing it? 2:59 a.m., 1 minute. My heart is beating faster now, adrenaline flooding my system despite the fact that I've heard this sound 42 times before. There's something primal about it, something that triggers ancient, instinctive fear. My body knows, even if my mind doesn't fully understand, that whatever makes that sound is dangerous. The 3 lit windows on the 4th floor seem to pulse slightly, though that might just be my imagination. The yellowish light behind them flickers, like candle flame, casting brief, distorted shadows against the curtains. Shadows that sometimes look like they might be moving. 300 a.m., the silence hits first, crashing over the town like a wave. Every ambient sound cuts off simultaneously. The refrigerators hum from our kitchen. The distant traffic, even my own breathing, seems to vanish into this void of quiet. The air itself feels different, thicker, pressing against my skin with almost physical weight. Then it begins. Low at first, barely audible, like a vibration felt more than heard. It builds quickly, rising in pitch and volume, swelling until it fills the entire night. The howling pours from the garret building, not from any specific window, but from the building itself, as if the very structure is screaming. The sound has texture and depth, layers of noise that seem to fold in on themselves, creating harmonics that shouldn't be possible from any natural source. I press my hands over my ears, but it doesn't help. The sound penetrates everything, bypasses my attempts at defense, settles directly into my bones. My windows rattle in their frames. The glass in the picture on my wall vibrates, making the image blur and dance. In the distance, car alarms begin to wail, triggered by the sonic assault. And then I see it. Movement in one of the lit windows on the 4th floor. A shadow passes across the curtain, tall and oddly proportioned, its outline unclear and shifting. It pauses at the window, and even from across the street, even through the curtain and the distance, I feel it looking directly at me. The howling changes pitch, becomes almost interrogative, as if the sound itself is asking a question. The shadow at the window raises what might be an arm, or something like an arm, and presses it against the glass. The curtain parts slightly, and I catch a glimpse of something pale and wrong before the curtain falls back into place. My phone vibrates on the table beside me. Despite the howling, despite the fear coursing through my veins, I glance down at it. A text message from an unknown number. Estiop Wutish ING. My hands start to shake. I look back at the window, but the shadow is gone. The howling continues, relentless, drilling into my skull. I should close the curtains. I should go back to bed. I should do anything except continue to stare at that building. But I can't look away. Another text. A numero ESEWUTO. The 3 lit windows on the 4th floor suddenly go dark. For a moment, I feel relief. Maybe it's over. Maybe tonight will be different. Then, one by one, windows throughout the building begin to light up. Not with the same yellowish glow as before, but with harsh, white light that spills out into the darkness like searchlights. 4th floor, 5th floor, 6th, They illuminate in a pattern that seems random but isn't, forming something I can almost recognize, something that might be a symbol or a sign. The howling reaches a crescendo, and underneath it, or within it, I hear something else. Voices, human voices, speaking in unison, chanting words in a language I don't understand, but that makes my skin crawl nonetheless. The syllables are wrong, shaped for mouths that aren't quite human, resonating at frequencies that make my eyes water. Then, abruptly, it stops. The silence returns, even more oppressive than before. The lights in the garret building wink out, one by one, like closing eyes. Within seconds, it's exactly as it was before 3 a.m. Dark, quiet, seemingly abandoned. If not for the car alarms still wailing in the distance, and my racing heart, I might believe I'd imagined the whole thing. My phone vibrates again. Another text. Tomorrow night. 4th floor, apartment 4C. Come alone. I stare at the message for a long time. My thumb hovers over the delete button, trembling. This is insane. I should block the number. I should tell Michelle. I should call the police. Though I already know what will happen. They'll send someone to check. They'll find nothing wrong. They'll look at me with that expression that says they think I'm losing my mind. Maybe I am. The next day passes in a blur of normalcy that feels more surreal than the night's events. I go to the hardware store. I help customers find the right size nails and the proper grade of sandpaper. I discuss weather with Mrs. Patterson and promise to order that special wood stain for Mr. Rodriguez. I smile and make change and act like a normal person having a normal day. But all I can think about is the message, the invitation, the command. Michelle notices my distraction at dinner. You seem far away tonight, she says, her fork paused halfway to her mouth. Just tired, I tell her, and it's not entirely a lie. I haven't slept properly in weeks. Maybe you should see Dr. Morrison. Get something to help you sleep. Maybe. I agree, though we both know I won't. After Michelle goes to bed, I sit in the living room with the lights off, watching the garret building. Through our front window, it squats across the street like a patient predator, all dark windows and silent stone. Ordinary, innocent. But I know what it becomes at 3 a.m. At 20:30, I make my decision. I grab my jacket and my phone. I write a note for Michelle, just in case. Couldn't sleep. Went for a walk. Back soon. Love you. And leave it on the kitchen counter where she'll find it if she wakes. The night air is cool against my face as I step outside. The street is empty, bathed in the amber glow of streetlights. My footsteps sound unnaturally loud as I cross the street, approaching the garret building. Up close, it's even more imposing. The entrance is a heavy wooden door set in a stone archway, with iron fixtures that have oxidized to a deep green. There's a brass plaque beside the door, JRITYL-EST, 1923. I try the door, expecting it to be locked. It swings open silently, as if freshly oiled. The lobby is lit by a single bulb hanging from the ceiling, casting long shadows across the faded floor tiles. There's a smell in the air, old paper, dust, and something else something organic and slightly sweet that makes my nose wrinkle. A staircase leads upward into darkness. No elevator, or if there is one, I can't see it. I check my phone, 5:43 a.m., 17 minutes until the howling begins. The stairs creak under my weight as I climb. First floor, second floor. The building is silent except for my breathing and my footsteps. Each landing has 4 doors, 2 on each side, with tarnished numbers marking them. I see no light under any of the doors, no sounds of life, just emptiness and waiting darkness. Third floor. My legs are starting to burn from the climb. I pause, wondering if I should turn back. This is insane. Dangerous. I'm following instructions from an anonymous text message into an abandoned building in the middle of the night. Every rational part of my brain is screaming at me to leave. But I keep climbing. 4th floor. Apartment 4C. I stand before the door. My hand raised to knock. The wood is old but well maintained, painted a deep burgundy that looks black in the dim light. There's no sound from inside. 2:51 a.m. I knock. 3 sharp raps that echo down the stairwell. Nothing. No response. No sound of footsteps approaching. I'm about to knock again when I hear it. A soft click as the lock disengages. The door swings inward an inch, revealing nothing but darkness beyond. Hello. My voice sounds small and frightened to my own ears. No answer. But from somewhere in the darkness of the apartment, I hear breathing slow. Steady. Multiple sources. Every instinct I have is telling me to run. To turn around and flee down the stairs and out into the street and never look back. But I've come this far. After 3 nights of listening to that howling, after all the questions and confusion and fear, I need to know. I push the door open and step inside. The darkness is absolute. I fumble for my phone, activating its flashlight. The beam cuts through the blackness, revealing a room that defies my expectations. It's not abandoned or decrepit. The space is furnished, ornately so. Victorian-era furniture arranged in careful groupings. Wallpaper with intricate patterns that seem to shift and move in my flashlight's beam. Paintings on the walls. Portraits of people wearing old, fashioned clothing, their eyes seeming to follow my light. And in the center of the room, facing me, are the others. There are 9 of them. Men and women of various ages, all dressed in normal, contemporary clothing. They sit perfectly still in chairs, arranged in a semicircle, their faces lit from below by candles placed on the floor before them. The effect is unsettling, turning their features into masks of light and shadow. "You came," says the woman in the center. Her voice is ordinary, almost friendly. "We weren't sure you would. My throat is dry. Who are you?" "What is this?" "We're your neighbors," she says simply. "We've always been here, in this building. Waiting for what?" 2:57 a.m. for someone who would listen, says a man on the left. Someone who would hear and not pretend. Someone who would come when called. The howling. Necessary," the woman interrupts. A way of reaching out, of testing. Most people hear it but choose to forget, to rationalize it away. to convince themselves it's just the wind or old pipes or their imagination. But you didn't do that. You kept listening. You kept watching. You admitted it was real. What are you? I ask, though I'm not sure I want the answer. The 9 figures look at each other, some expression passing between them that I can't read. Then, in unison, they begin to change. Not dramatically. Nothing like the transformations in movies. But their features shift subtly, becoming less defined, less fixed. As if the faces I'm seeing are just one possibility among many. And they're allowing me to glimpse the uncertainty beneath. Were what remains, the woman says, her voice taking on harmonic overtones. When this building was constructed, certain rituals were performed. Protections were put in place. We are those protections given form and purpose. We watch. We wait. We guard. Guard against what? 2:59 a.m. Against what sleeps beneath, she says, and points at the floor. I look down, and for the first time, I notice patterns in the floorboards. Deliberate arrangements forming symbols that hurt to look at directly. They pulse with a faint light in rhythm with my heartbeat. Every town has its shadows. Another figure says, every place has its buried things. This town is built on something old, something that dreams. And every night at 3 a.m., it reaches up, trying to wake, trying to emerge. And every night, we push it back down with sound, with the howling that shapes reality, that reinforces the barriers, that keeps the sleeping thing asleep. But it's getting stronger. The woman continues. The barriers are weakening. We've been doing this for so long, holding the line, but we're fading too. We need help. We need others who can hear, who can believe, who can join us. 300 a.m. the silence hits, and I understand now that it's not natural silence, but a void. A space where something is actively pushing through from below, trying to break free. Then comes the howling, but I'm hearing it differently now. Not as random noise, but as structure, as purpose. As 9 voices raised in deliberate harmony, weaving sound into a barrier, into chains, into a prison for something vast and hungry. The 9 figures begin to vocalize, their mouths opening wide, the sound pouring from them. I feel the vibrations in my chest, feel them resonating with something deep below, and beneath their howling, I hear it, the thing they're holding back. A vast, writhing presence that presses against the foundations of reality, eager and ancient, and absolutely wrong. Join us, the woman says during a brief pause in the sound. Add your voice to ours. Help us hold the line. I'm shaking, my mind unable to fully process what I'm experiencing. Part of me wants to run, to escape this nightmare. But another part understands that running won't help. Whatever is beneath this building, whatever sleeps under this town, it's real. And if these 9 voices fail, if the barriers collapse you, what happens if I refuse? I manage to ask. Then one night soon will fail, she says simply. The howling will stop, and the thing below will wake. And everyone in this town, everyone you know and love, will be its first meal after a very long sleep. The howling continues. waves of sound that I now recognize as protective, as necessary. The 9 figures look at me with eyes that are both human and not, waiting for my decision. 3:15 a.m., I open my mouth. I don't know if I'm capable of making the sounds they make, of joining this strange choir, but I try. A tentative note at first, awkward and wrong. The 9 adjust their harmony to accommodate me, guiding me, teaching me. And slowly, incredibly, I begin to feel it. The way the sound shapes reality, the way it presses down against the stirring thing below. I sing. I howl. I join the watch. And as the sound pours from me, as I add my voice to theirs, I understand that I'll never leave this room. That I've become the 10th guardian. That every night at 3 a.m., I'll be here with the others, keeping the watch. Maintaining the howling, holding the line between the sleeping world above and the nightmare stirring below. When the hour ends and silence returns, I try to leave. But my body won't move. I'm rooted to the spot, frozen in place like the others. Don't fight it, the woman says gently. By morning, you'll be able to move again. You can go home, live your life. But every night at 2:45, you'll feel the call. And you'll come. You'll always come. Just like us. Just like all the others before us. How long? I whisper. How long have you been doing this? Long enough to forget what we were before, she says. Long enough that our old lives feel like dreams, but not so long that we've forgotten why it matters. I think of Michelle, sleeping peacefully in our bed across the street. I think of my hardware store, my customers, my normal life. All of it now divided by this threshold, before I knew and after. Will I forget too? Eventually, another figure says, his voice kind. The memories fade. The person you were becomes distant, but the purpose remains. That never fades. The candles flicker, casting dancing shadows on the walls. I notice now that some of the portraits I saw earlier aren't just paintings. They're photographs, old ones, dating back decades. And in each one, I can recognize the faces of my 9 companions wearing different clothes, different hairstyles, but the same eyes, the same watching, guarding eyes. How many before us? I ask. Hundreds, the woman says, since 1923. The building has always had its guardians. Some serve for years, some for decades. When one of us fades completely, becomes too thin to hold their note, another must be found. Someone who listens. Someone who doesn't look away. 3:30 a.m. My paralysis is beginning to ease. I can feel sensation returning to my fingers, my toes. But I'm different now. Changed. I can feel the thing below more clearly. Its vast presence pressed against the underside of reality like a face against glass. And I can feel how the howling shapes the barrier, reinforces it, keeps that face from breaking through. Go home, the woman tells me. Sleep if you can. Live your life tomorrow. But remember, 2:45 a.m. every night, you'll feel the call, and you must answer. I stumble toward the door, my legs unsteady. As I reach the threshold, I turn back. What's your name? She smiles, but it's a sad smile. I don't remember anymore. None of us do. We're just the watch now. just the howling. That's all that remains. I make my way down the stairs, each step feeling surreal. The lobby is still lit by that single bulb. The street outside is still empty. I cross back to my apartment building, climb the stairs to my floor, slip inside as quietly as I can. Michelle is still asleep, undisturbed. The note I left is still on the counter. I crumple it up and throw it away. Then I stand in the living room, looking across the street at the Garrett building. Dark and silent again. Ordinary. But I know now what it holds, what it guards, what it requires. I should feel terrified. I should feel trapped. But instead, there's a strange sense of purpose settling over me. For 43 days, I've listened to that howling with fear and confusion. Now I understand it. Now I'm part of it. The next morning, Michelle finds me making breakfast. "You're up early," she says, kissing my cheek. Couldn't sleep. I tell her, and it's the truth. Bad dreams. Something like that. I go to work. I help customers. I smile and joke and act normal. But I can feel it now, always. The thing beneath the town, pressing upward with patient, ancient hunger. And I can feel the others too, the 9 guardians, going about their day lives as well, scattered throughout the town, pretending to be ordinary people until 2:45 a.m. comes and calls them back to their purpose. That night, at 2:43 a.m., I tell Michelle I need to use the bathroom. She murmurs something in her sleep and rolls over. I dress quickly in the dark, slip out of the apartment, and cross the street. The door to the Garrett building opens before I can touch it. The 9 are already in their places when I climb to the 4th floor, when I enter apartment 4C. They don't greet me. There's no need. I take my position, the 10th chair that has appeared in the semicircle, and I wait. 300 a.m. The silence, the void, the pressing upward of the thing below. And then we sing. We howl. We raise our voices in that strange, harmonic sound that shapes reality and reinforces barriers and keeps nightmares sleeping. My voice blends with theirs. A stronger tonight, more certain. I can feel how the sound works now, can sense the patterns we're weaving, the cage we're maintaining. Beneath us, the thing writhers and hungers and dreams of waking. But we hold. We've always held. We'll keep holding for as long as we can, for as long as we remain. This is my life now. By day, a normal man in a normal town. By night, a guardian of the threshold, one voice in a choir that sings the world safe. Michelle will never know. My customers will never know. No one will know except the 10 of us, and the thing that sleeps below, and the town that rests unknowing above it all. I wonder sometimes how long I'll last. How many nights until my memories begin to fade, until my old life becomes distant and dreamlike, until there's nothing left of me but the howling and the watch. Years? Decades. But then I think of Michelle sleeping safely across the street. I think of Mrs. Chen and her chamomile tea. I think of all the ordinary people living ordinary lives, completely unaware of what lurks beneath them, what nearly breaks through every night at 3 a.m., and I keep singing. The hour ends. Silence returns. I stand and nod to the others and make my way home through the empty streets. I slip back into bed beside my wife, and she shifts slightly, her hand finding mine in the darkness. "Love you," she murmurs, still mostly asleep. "Love you too," I whisper back, and I do. I love her. I love this town. I love the ordinary. Daylight world with all its mundane concerns and simple pleasures. That's why I'll keep returning to apartment 4C. That's why I'll keep adding my voice to the howling. That's why I'll stand watch, night after night, holding the line between the sleeping world and the thing that must never wake. Tomorrow, someone will ask me if I heard the strange noise last night. I'll shake my head and change the subject, playing my part in the town's collective denial. Because that's part of the protection too. The not speaking of it. The not acknowledging, the maintaining of the illusion that everything is normal and safe and understood. But I'll know, and the others will know, and when 2:45 a.m. comes tomorrow night, we'll answer the call once more. The watch continues. The watch never ends. And somewhere deep below, older than the town, older than memory, older than reason, the thing dreams of us, and we sing it back to sleep. Every single night forever. Story 3. I first heard about the man in red from my younger brother, Ethan, when I was 12 years old. He'd come home from school pale and quiet, refusing to eat dinner. When Mom finally coaxed it out of him, he said that Tommy Brennan had told everyone at recess about a man who walked the streets at night, dressed all in red, looking for bad children. What happens when he finds them? Mom had asked, humoring him. Ethan's voice had dropped to a whisper. He comes into their room, and they're gone by morning. Her mom had laughed it off as schoolyard stories, the kind of urban legend kids love to terrify each other with. I'd rolled my eyes and called Ethan a baby. But I noticed he'd been extra good that week, making his bed without being asked, finishing his vegetables, saying please and thank you. That was 15 years ago. I'd forgotten all about the man in red until last month. When I moved back to my hometown of Millbrook to take care of my father after his stroke, the town hadn't changed much. Same tree, lined streets, same corner store, same playground where Ethan and I used to play. Ethan was gone now. Had been for 12 years. They'd called it a sleepwalking accident. Said he'd wandered out of the house one night and fallen into the quarry on the edge of town. They never found his body. He was 15. I'd been living in the city for a decade, but Millbrook pulled me back like gravity. Dad needed me, and maybe I needed the familiar streets, the slow pace, the memories of a simpler time. I'd been back for 2 weeks when I noticed the poster on the community bulletin board outside the library. HAVEOU SINTS KLD. The photo showed a young girl, maybe 8 years old, with blonde pigtails and a gap-toothed smile. Melissa Huang. Missing since October 3rd. Last seen leaving Henderson Elementary School. Awful, isn't it? A voice said beside me. I turned to find Mrs. Pemberton, my old third-grade teacher, now deeply wrinkled, but still sharp-eyed. She's the third one this year," she continued, adjusting her glasses. "Police say runaways, but these are good kids from good families. They don't just run away." "Third one?" I asked. She nodded gravely. "Melissa's the most recent. Before her was Jacob Torres in August, and before that, Emma Wright in June. All elementary school age. All disappeared from their bedrooms in the middle of the night." A chill ran down my spine. From their bedrooms, doors still locked from the inside, windows closed, parents sleeping just down the hall. It's like they vanished into thin air. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. Though some say they heard footsteps, heavy ones, walking through the house at night. I thanked her and walked home, but her words stayed with me. 3 children, gone from locked rooms. It didn't make sense. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Ethan, about the story of the man in red. Just a legend, I told myself. Just a scary story to keep kids behaving. But what if it wasn't? I got out of bed and opened my laptop, searching for information about the missing children. The local news had covered the stories, but details were sparse. Police were investigating but had no leads. Parents were desperate. The town was on edge. I dug deeper, searching archived newspapers, old police blotters, historical records, and I found something that made my blood run cold. 1987. 2 children missing, taken from their bedrooms at night. 1972 v. 3 children missing, same circumstances. 1954. 4 children missing. 1931, 2 children missing. Going back over a century, every 15 to 20 years. Children disappeared from Millbrook, always from their bedrooms, always without a trace. And in the margins of an old newspaper article from 1954, someone had scrawled in faded ink, "The man in red walks again." I stared at my screen for a long time, trying to rationalize what I was seeing. Coincidence, pattern recognition in random data, urban legends that repeated themselves across generations. But my hands were shaking. The next day, I went to the library and asked for archived records, anything about local folklore, legends, oral histories. The librarian, a young woman named Cara, seemed surprised by the request, but helped me search. We found a thin folder labeled Local Mythology and Folk Tales, compiled by a Millbrook College anthropology student in 1989 as part of a thesis project. Inside was a handwritten account labeled The Red Man, a Millbrook Legend. I read it standing at the table, unable to sit. According to the document, the legend dated back to the town's founding in 1847. A man named Silas Redmond had arrived that year, dressed entirely in red clothing, red coat, red pants, red hat. He'd been odd but harmless, keeping to himself in a small house on what was then the outskirts of town. Children, as children do, had mocked him, called him names, thrown stones at his windows, played cruel pranks. One winter night, 3 of the worst offenders, boys aged 9, 11, and 12, disappeared from their beds. Search parties found no trace of them. The town blamed Silas, but there was no evidence. No bodies, no witnesses, no proof. They'd driven him out anyway, burning his house to the ground. As Silas left Millbrook, he'd supposedly turned back and shouted a curse. For every generation, I will return, and the children who forget kindness will remember fear. The account ended with a note. No historical records confirm Silas Redmond's existence. The legend appears to be cautionary in nature, designed to encourage good behavior in children. I photocopied the document and brought it home, where I spread it out on the kitchen table, alongside my notes about the disappearances. Every 15 to 20 years, a generation. If the pattern held, the disappearances would continue until... when? How many children would be taken? That night, I stood at my bedroom window, looking out at the quiet street. It was nearly midnight, and Millbrook was dark and still. Streetlights cast pools of yellow light at regular intervals. Nothing moved. Then I saw him. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me, fatigue and fear manifesting as hallucination. But no, there was someone walking down the middle of the street. Slowly, deliberately, as if taking a midnight stroll. He was dressed entirely in red coat that reached his knees, red pants, red shoes. Even from my second-story window, I could see the color clearly, almost glowing in the dim light. He walked with a strange gait, not limping exactly, but moving as if his joints worked differently than they should. His face was shadowed by a wide, brimmed red hat. He stopped in front of the Hendersons' house. The house where Melissa Huang had lived before she disappeared. He stood there for a long moment, perfectly still, head tilted up as if observing the dark windows. Then he continued walking, passing out of my line of sight. I ran to the other side of the house, to the guest room window that faced the opposite direction. I caught sight of him again, now several houses down, still walking that slow, purposeful walk. He stopped in front of another house, the Wright's house, where Emma Wright had lived. My heart was pounding so hard, I could hear it in my ears. I grabbed my phone and called 911. 911, what's your emergency? There's someone walking down Maple Street, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I think he might be connected to the missing children. Is this person threatening you or anyone else, sir? No. But he's dressed in all red, and he's stopping in front of houses where children disappeared. Sir, walking down a public street isn't a crime. Is he attempting to break into any property? No. But if you see him commit a crime or trespass, call us back. Otherwise, we can't dispatch officers for someone walking on a public street. The line went dead. I looked back out the window. The man in red was gone, vanished, as if he'd never been there. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the window with all the lights off, watching the street until dawn. He never returned. The next morning, I drove to the police station and asked to speak to whoever was handling the missing children cases. After 20 minutes of waiting, a tired-looking detective named Sarah Chen agreed to see me. I told her everything, the pattern of disappearances, the legend of Silas Redmond, what I'd seen the night before. She listened patiently, taking notes, her expression neutral. When I finished, she closed her notebook and looked at me with what I can only describe as practiced compassion. Mr. Morrison, I understand you're concerned, and I appreciate you bringing this information to us. But we've investigated thoroughly, and there's no evidence of an abductor. The cases remain open, but we're exploring other possibilities. What other possibilities? I demanded. 3 kids vanished from locked rooms. What could that be besides an abduction? She hesitated. In cases like these, we have to consider all angles. Family dynamics, mental health issues in the children themselves. They were 8 years old, 9 years old. You think they orchestrated their own disappearances? I'm not saying that. But urban legends and local folklore aren't evidence, Mr. Morrison. A person dressed in red walking down a street isn't a crime. And patterns in historical data can be coincidental. I left the station feeling helpless and frustrated. They weren't going to help. They couldn't see what was right in front of them, or maybe they didn't want to. That afternoon, I went to visit the Torres family, parents of Jacob, the boy who disappeared in August. They lived in a modest house on the east side of town, and when I knocked, Mrs. Torres answered, her eyes red, rimmed, and hollow. I introduced myself and explained that I was looking into the disappearances. She invited me in immediately, desperate to talk to anyone who might care. The house was a shrine to Jacob. His school photos covered the walls. His toys still arranged in the living room, as if he might return any moment to play with them. Tell me what happened the night he disappeared, I said gently. Mrs. Torres's hands trembled as she poured us tea. It was a normal night. Jacob he'd been having some trouble at school. Fighting with other kids, talking back to teachers. We'd been working on it, you know. Teaching him to be kind, to control his temper. My chest tightened. Go on. He'd been grounded that week. No video games, no TV. He was angry about it, said we were mean, said he hated us. Her voice broke. The last thing he said to me was that he hated me. And then, the next morning, his room was empty. Door still locked from the outside. We locked it because he'd been sneaking out. Window closed. No note. No sign of how he left. Did you hear anything that night? She nodded slowly. I woke up around 3 a.m. I thought I heard footsteps in the hallway. Heavy ones, like an adult man. I assumed it was my husband getting water. But when I looked, he was asleep next to me. I got up to check, but the hallway was empty. All the doors were closed. Could the footsteps have been outside? No. Her certainty was absolute. They were inside, in our hallway, walking past our bedroom toward Jacob's room. A chill ran through me. And you didn't see anyone? Nothing. Just the empty hallway. But I felt something. A presence. And it was cold, Mr. Morrison. So cold I could see my breath. I talked to her for another hour, learning about Jacob, his struggles, his anger, his recent behavior. When I left, she gripped my hand desperately. Find him, she whispered. Find my boy. I promised I would try. Over the next week, I interviewed the families of the other missing children. The pattern was undeniable. Each child had been misbehaving in the weeks before their disappearance. Emma Wright had been caught bullying a younger student. Melissa Huang had been suspended for stealing from other kids' lunches. And each family reported the same thing: footsteps in the night, a presence in their home, a cold that settled over everything. But no one saw the man in red except me. I became obsessed. I spent my nights watching the streets, documenting everything. I set up a camera pointed at the street from my window, recording continuously. For 2 weeks, nothing happened. Then, on a Tuesday night, my camera caught him. The footage showed the man in red walking down Maple Street at 3:17 a.m. Same slow, purposeful gait. Same red clothing. He stopped in front of a house I didn't recognize, stood there for exactly 90 seconds, then continued on. I paused the video and zoomed in on his face, but the resolution was too poor. The image pixelated into meaningless blobs of color. I could make out the shape of a face, but no features. The next morning, I looked up the address of the house where he'd stopped aged 47 Maple Street. The Donnelly family. I looked them up on social media and found they had a 10-year-old son named Marcus. I had to warn them. I drove to their house and knocked on the door. Mrs. Donnelly answered, holding a laundry basket, looking annoyed at the interruption. I explained who I was and why I was there, showed her the footage on my phone. Her expression shifted from annoyance to concern to fear. Marcus has been having problems at school, she admitted. He's been in fights. Got suspended last week for pushing another kid down the stairs. We've been at our wits' end. You need to watch him carefully, I said. Lock his windows. Maybe sleep in his room for the next few nights. She promised she would, thanked me, and closed the door. I could see the fear in her eyes. That night, I parked my car down the street from the Donnelly house and watched. I wasn't sure what I could do if the man in red appeared, but I couldn't just sit at home knowing a child might be in danger. At 2:47 a.m., he came, walking down the middle of the street, red coat trailing behind him like a cape. He stopped in front of the Donnelly house and stood there, head tilted up toward the second floor windows. I got out of my car, my legs shaking. I had no plan, no weapon, nothing but my phone flashlight and a desperate need to do something. "Hey!" I shouted across the street. "Hey, you!" The man in red didn't move, didn't acknowledge me at all. I walked closer, my heart hammering. "I know what you are. I know what you're doing." Still no response. He remained perfectly motionless, a statue in red clothing. I was 10 feet away now, close enough to see details. His coat was old-fashioned, like something from the 1800s. His pants were wool, his shoes leather with tarnished buckles. His hat brim cast his face in shadow, so deep it seemed unnatural. "You can't take him," I said, my voice breaking. "I won't let you." Finally, slowly, he turned his head toward me. I couldn't see his face. Even looking directly at where his face should be, I saw only darkness. Not shadow exactly, but an absence, a void where features should exist. When he spoke, his voice came from everywhere and nowhere, a whisper that seemed to bypass my ears and speak directly into my mind. Do you know what they've done? They're children, I said. They make mistakes. They're learning. They hurt others, without remorse, without conscience. They take and break and destroy, and their parents make excuses. That's not true. You know it is. The void where his face should be seen to deepen. You remember Ethan. You remember what he did. My blood went cold. What are you talking about? The day before he disappeared. The cat. The neighbor's cat that went missing. Ethan found it, didn't he? And what did he do? I felt sick. I did remember, though I'd buried the memory. Ethan coming home with scratches on his arms, looking strangely satisfied. The neighbor crying about her missing cat. Ethan's bedroom door locked all evening. He was troubled, I whispered. He needed help. He was cruel, and you knew. You knew and said nothing. Tears were streaming down my face now. He was my brother. And Marcus Donnelly pushed a younger child down concrete stairs. Hay sent him to the hospital with a fractured skull. Does he deserve protection? Does his cruelty deserve excuses? He deserves a chance to change. They all do. The man in red tilted his head, as if considering this. The darkness where his face should be seemed to swirl. A chance, he repeated. How many chances? How many victims must suffer while we wait for them to change? That's not for you to decide, isn't it? Someone must draw the line. Someone must protect the innocent from the cruel. If not me, then who? I had no answer. We stood there in the cold night, facing each other across an unbridgeable divide. Him in his red coat, ancient and patient and utterly certain of his purpose. Me, trembling and desperate, and clinging to hope that children could be saved. What are you? I finally asked. A consequence, a balance, a reminder that cruelty has a price. Where do you take them? Nowhere. Everywhere. They step out of this world and into the space between. The place where all forgotten things go. Where cruel children become echoes, walking forever through empty rooms, feeling what their victims felt. That's not justice. That's torture. Is it? Or is it simply experiencing the consequences of their own actions? They hurt others. Now they know how it feels. They stole joy. Now they live without it. They showed no mercy. Now they receive none. Behind him, I saw a light turn on in the Donnelly house. A figure appeared at the window. Mrs. Donnelly, looking out into the night. Please, I said, give him a chance. Give them all a chance. The man in red was silent for a long moment. Then, you want to save them. Less, then make them understand. Make them feel remorse. True remorse. Not fear of punishment, but genuine understanding of the pain they've caused. Do that before I return, and perhaps they can be spared. When will you return? When the moon is dark, 3 nights from now. And then he was gone, not walking away, not fading. Simply gone, as if he'd never been there at all. I stood alone on the street, shaking and crying, and not entirely sure what had just happened. The next morning, I went back to the Donnelly house. I talked to Marcus, really talked to him. I showed him photos of the boy he'd pushed, still in a hospital bed. I asked him how he'd feel if someone did that to him. How his mother would feel. Whether he'd want his little sister to be hurt that way. At first, he was defensive, angry, made excuses. But slowly, over hours of conversation, something shifted. The walls came down. He cried. He said he was sorry, and I believed him. I did the same with the families of other children in Millbrook who had been cruel. I talked to parents, to teachers, to the kids themselves. Some listened. Some changed. Some didn't. 3 nights later, I watched the streets again. The man in red walked through Millbrook, stopping at houses. But this time, he didn't linger. He paused, seemed to assess something I couldn't see, and moved on. When he reached the Donnelly house, he stopped for a long moment. I held my breath. Then he moved on. Marcus Donnelly woke up the next morning, still in his bed, safe and whole. But the man in red didn't leave Millbrook that night. He continued walking, stopping at other houses. Houses I hadn't reached yet. Children I hadn't talked to. In the morning, 2 more children were gone. I failed them. I tried to save everyone, but I couldn't reach them all in time. The man in red still walks the streets of Millbrook. I see him some nights, making his rounds, a red figure moving through darkness, a reminder, a consequence, a balance. I've dedicated my life now to reaching the children before he does, teaching empathy, building understanding, breaking the cycle of cruelty before it hardens into something irredeemable. Some nights, I wonder if he's real or if I've gone mad. If the disappearances have a rational explanation, I'm too broken to see. But then I look at Marcus Donnelly, now thriving in school, kind to others, transformed by genuine remorse. I look at the other children I've reached, the ones who learned to feel what others feel, to care about consequences. And I know whether the man in red is real or not, whether he's a curse or a legend or something else entirely. The work matters. The change matters. Because cruelty has a price, and someone must remind us to pay it before it's too late. Last week, I received a letter with no return address. Inside was a single sentence, written in faded red ink. You've bought them time. Use it wisely. I keep it on my desk. A reminder of my responsibility. Every day, I work to reach more children, to teach more empathy, to prevent more disappearances. But every night, when I look out my window, I wonder how many more children will vanish before I've reached them all. And in the distance, when the moon is dark, I sometimes see a figure in red, walking patient and slow through empty streets. Watching, waiting, measuring, he'll return when cruelty returns. He always does, and I'll keep trying to stop him, one child at a time. One moment of genuine understanding at a time. Because that's all any of us can do. Try to teach kindness before consequence comes calling in the night, dressed all in red. Story 4. I should have trusted my instincts the first time I saw the shadow move. It was 3 weeks after we brought Lily home from the hospital. I was exhausted, running on maybe 2 hours of sleep strung together in 15-minute increments. My wife, Rachel, was asleep in our bedroom, finally getting some rest after a difficult night. I stood in the doorway of the nursery at 2:47 a.m., watching our daughter sleep in her crib. She was perfect, tiny fists curled beside her face, chest rising and falling with peaceful breaths. The mobile above her crib turned slowly, casting gentle shadows on the wall. That's when I noticed it. One of the shadows didn't match the mobile's movement. It was subtle. If I'd blinked, I would have missed it. But there, on the wall behind the crib, was a shadow that seemed to move independently, sliding along the painted surface, as if something were moving between the nightlight and the wall. I looked around the room, trying to find the source. Nothing. The window blinds were closed. The door was behind me. The only objects in the room were the crib, the rocking chair, the changing table, and the mobile. I must have been more tired than I thought, seeing things that weren't there. I checked on Lily one more time, adjusted her blanket, and went back to bed. The next night I saw it again. This time I was more alert, having managed a 3-hour nap in the afternoon. I'd gotten up to check on Lily around midnight and stood in the doorway watching her sleep. The shadow moved across the wall, smooth, fluid, deliberate. Not a flicker or a trick of the light, but an actual movement. It reminded me of how shadows move when someone walks past a lamp, except there was no one walking. No one but me, standing still in the doorway. The shadow approached the crib. My heart rate spiked. I flipped on the overhead light. The shadow vanished instantly. The room was bright and normal and empty, except for me and my sleeping daughter. Rachel appeared behind me, bleary-eyed. "What's wrong?" "Nothing," I said, feeling foolish. "Just checking on her." "You turned on the light. You'll wake her up." "Sorry. I thought I saw." "Never mind." We went back to bed. But I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about that shadow, the way it had moved toward the crib with such purpose. The next day, I mentioned it to my friend Marcus, a fellow new dad whose daughter was 6 months old. We met for coffee while Rachel watched Lily. "You're just sleep-deprived," Marcus said, laughing. "I once hallucinated that our cat was plotting against me. Sleep deprivation does crazy things to your brain. This felt different." I insisted. It was too consistent, too specific. "Have you tried actually sleeping? Like, more than 2 hours at a time?" I admitted I hadn't. "There's your problem. Your brain is literally breaking down from lack of REM sleep. Visual hallucinations are totally normal at this stage." He was probably right. I was exhausted, running on fumes. My perception compromised. Of course I was seeing things that weren't there. But that night, at 3:15 a.m., I saw the shadow again. This time I didn't turn on the light. I stood in the doorway and watched. The shadow moved along the wall, same as before. But this time it didn't stop at the crib. It continued along the wall, around the corner, and disappeared behind the changing table. I waited, barely breathing. It emerged on the opposite wall, moving toward the ceiling. Then it stopped, directly above Lily's crib, and seemed to expand. Growing larger, darker, more defined, I took a step into the room. The shadow immediately retreated, sliding back along the wall and vanishing into the corner. My hands were shaking. Whatever this was, it responded to my presence. It was aware of me. I spent the next day researching. Carbon monoxide can cause hallucinations. I checked our detectors. They were working fine. Sleep deprivation. Yes, but Marcus saw things too, and this was too consistent. Postpartum psychosis that typically affected mothers, not fathers, but I scheduled an appointment with my doctor anyway. I also did something I'm not proud of. I set up a camera. I installed a baby monitor with night vision capability, positioned to capture the entire nursery. If the shadow appeared again, I'd have proof. Or proof that I was losing my mind. Either way, I'd know. That night, Rachel and I both went to bed early. Lily had been fussy all day, and we were both running on empty. I set the baby monitor on my nightstand, volume low, and fell into an exhausted sleep. I woke to the sound of Lily fussing at 2:33 a.m. I grabbed the monitor to check on her before getting up. The night vision showed the nursery in shades of green and black. Lily was stirring in her crib, not fully crying yet. Just making the little sounds that meant she'd wake herself up in a few minutes if we didn't intervene. And there, on the wall behind her crib, was the shadow. But now, seeing it on camera, I could make out more detail. It wasn't just a formless dark spot. It had shape, almost human-shaped, but wrong, too long, too thin. Limbs bent at angles that didn't quite match human anatomy. As I watched, it moved down the wall toward the crib. I was out of bed and running before conscious thought caught up. I burst into the nursery and flipped on the light. Nothing. Just Lily in her crib, now fully awake and crying from my dramatic entrance, and empty walls showing nothing but cheerful yellow paint. Rachel appeared moments later. "What's going on?" "I saw something on the monitor," I said, picking up Lily and holding her close. Her warm, solid weight was reassuring. "What did you see?" "A shadow, on the wall, moving toward her crib." Rachel's expression shifted from concern to frustration. "You're exhausted." "We're both exhausted. But you can't keep doing this." Bursting in here, waking her up because you think you saw something. I did see something. Look at the monitor. I pulled up the recorded footage and played it back. We both watched the screen. The nursery appeared empty. Normal. Just Lily stirring in her crib. No shadows, no movement except hers. "I don't see anything," Rachel said quietly. It was there, right there on the wall. It moved down toward. "You need to sleep. Really sleep. And maybe talk to someone." Oh, she took Lily from me and settled in the rocking chair to nurse. I stood there feeling helpless and confused. I'd seen it clearly on the monitor, but the recording showed nothing. Was I going insane? The next day, I forced myself to nap for 4 hours while Rachel watched Lily. When I woke up, I felt somewhat more human. My thoughts clearer. Maybe Rachel was right. Maybe I was so sleep-deprived that I was hallucinating, even creating false memories of what I'd seen on the monitor. I decided not to check the nursery that night, to trust that Lily was safe, that there was nothing there, that my exhausted brain had been playing tricks on me. But at 3:37 a.m., Lily's cries woke us both. We rushed to the nursery together. Lily was screaming, not her normal cry, but a sound of pure terror. Her face was red, eyes squeezed shut, little body rigid with fear. Rachel scooped her up immediately, checking her over for injury. But there was nothing physically wrong. No fever, no diaper issue, no visible cause for such distress. Bad dream, Rachel said, rocking her. Babies can have nightmares too. But as she said this, I noticed something. The mobile above the crib was spinning. Not the slow, gentle rotation it normally made, but fast, almost violently fast, as if someone had just hit it. "Did you touch the mobile?" I asked. "No," I went straight for Lily. "Why?" "It's spinning. Fast." We both stared at it. The mobile was already slowing down, returning to its normal lazy rotation. But there was no breeze in the room, no reason for it to have been spinning like that. Maybe she kicked it. Rachel suggested, but her voice was uncertain. From inside the crib, "It's too high." We were both quiet for a moment, the only sound Lily's gradually quieting sobs. "I think we should move her crib into our room," I said, "just for a while, until she's a bit older." Rachel nodded slowly. "Yeah, maybe that's a good idea." The next day, we rearranged our bedroom to accommodate the crib. It was cramped and awkward, but Lily would be right next to us. Safer. Or at least, I'd feel like she was safer. That night, Lily slept peacefully in our room. No shadows, no spinning mobiles, no mysterious movements. Rachel and I both slept better too, despite being woken several times for feedings. The nursery stood empty. 3 nights passed without incident. I started to relax, to believe that whatever I'd been experiencing was indeed just sleep deprivation and parental anxiety, manifesting as visual hallucinations. Then, on the 4th night, I woke to find Rachel's side of the bed empty. I checked the time, 3:33 a.m. Lily was asleep in her crib beside me, peaceful and quiet. Where was Rachel? I got up and searched the house. The bathroom was empty. The kitchen was dark. I found her in the nursery, standing in the middle of the room in her pajamas, staring at the wall. Rachel. She didn't respond. Didn't even acknowledge my presence. I walked closer and put my hand on her shoulder. "Rachel, what are you doing?" She blinked, as if waking from a trance. "What? Why am I in here?" "You were sleepwalking." "I don't sleepwalk." "You just did." She looked around the room, confused and frightened. "I don't remember coming in here. I don't remember getting out of bed." We went back to our room, but neither of us could sleep. In the morning, Rachel called her doctor and scheduled an appointment. Sleepwalking as an adult, especially suddenly starting, could indicate various medical issues. But 2 nights later, it happened again. I woke to find her standing in the nursery, staring at the same spot on the wall. This time, when I touched her shoulder, she spoke without waking up. It wants to see her. What wants to see her? The shadow. It's lonely. It just wants to see. My blood ran cold. Rachel, wake up. She turned to look at me, but her eyes were unfocused, seeing something else. It's been here for years, long before us. It lived in the walls, in the spaces between. It's so lonely. Wake up, Rachel, please. She blinked and suddenly focused on me. Why are we in here? Did Lily cry? You were sleepwalking again. What did I say? I hesitated, then told her everything. About the shadow. About what she'd just said about it being lonely. To my surprise, she didn't dismiss it. Instead, she went pale. I've been having dreams, she admitted. Every night since we moved the crib, dreams about something in the walls. Something that's been here longer than the house. Something that doesn't understand what it is or why it's here. But it's drawn to life, to warmth, to Lily. Why didn't you tell me? Because it sounds insane. Because I thought it was just post-pregnancy hormones or anxiety or lack of sleep. Because I didn't want it to be real. We stood in the empty nursery, both frightened, both exhausted, both trying to protect our daughter from something we didn't understand. What do we do? Rachel whispered. I didn't have an answer. The next day, I did something I'd been avoiding. I called the previous owners of the house. We'd bought it 2 years ago, before Lily, attracted by the good school district and the renovated nursery. Mrs. Patterson answered on the third ring. She was elderly now, living in a retirement community across the state. Oh, the house on Elm Street, she said when I identified myself. Such a lovely home. How are you enjoying it? It's great. I lied. I was actually calling about the nursery. It's beautifully done. Did you have children in that room? There was a long pause. No, she said finally. That was always a spare room. We never had children. Oh. The real estate agent said it was set up as a nursery when we bought it. Another pause. Yes, we set it up that way before selling. Thought it would appeal to young families. Mrs. Patterson, did you ever experience anything unusual in that room? The silence that followed was so long I thought the call had dropped. Mrs. Patterson. What kind of unusual? Her voice had changed, become guarded. Shadows. Movements that don't make sense. Dreams. I heard her inhale sharply. You have a baby in that room. We did. We moved her out. Good. Don't put her back. What is it? What's in there? I don't know what it is. My husband, God rest him. He used to say old houses have memories. That sometimes those memories get confused. Reach out. Try to connect with the living. We thought about having children when we first moved in, spent years trying. That room was supposed to be a nursery. She sighed deeply. But it never happened. And over the years, I'd go in that room and feel something. A presence, a longing. Like the room itself was mourning the children it never had. Does that sound mad? No, I said quietly. It doesn't? Kept the door closed the last 10 years we lived there. Never went in. And that seemed to satisfy it, whatever it was. But then we had to sell, and we couldn't sell a house with a locked room. So we set it up nice, painted it cheerful colors, made it look happy. Tried to give it what it wanted in a way. Something to look at, to imagine. You knew a family with a baby might buy the house. I hoped they wouldn't use that room. Hoped they'd have the baby sleep in their room, at least at first. But I couldn't. I couldn't tell anyone. Who would believe me? Who would buy a house if I said it was haunted by the ghost of children that never existed? After the call, I told Rachel everything. We sat at the kitchen table, Lily asleep in her bassinet between us, and tried to decide what to do. We could move, Rachel said, sell the house, and pass the problem to another family, another baby. What else can we do? We can't fight a shadow. We can't negotiate with something that might not even be real. That might just be our shared delusion from sleep deprivation. Mrs. Patterson experienced it too, years before we moved in. So it's been here for decades. It hasn't hurt anyone. Maybe it won't hurt Lily. Maybe it just wants to observe. The idea chilled me. Something watching our daughter, following her, present in her room every night. But Rachel was right. What could we actually do? The shadow hadn't harmed anyone. It moved on walls, spun a mobile, maybe entered people's dreams. Disturbing, yes, but not dangerous. Unless it became dangerous. We decided on a compromise. We'd keep Lily in our room for now. We'd seal the nursery, not just close the door, but seal it. I bought weather stripping and applied it all around the door frame, making it airtight. We moved furniture in front of it, and we started saving money to move. But something strange happened over the following weeks. The house changed. The atmosphere shifted. It felt sad. Grief seemed to permeate the walls. A melancholy presence that made both of us inexplicably depressed. Rachel started having nightmares every night. Not about the shadow, but about lost children, forgotten children, children who were never born. She'd wake up crying, unable to shake the sorrow. I felt it too. A weight on my chest, a constant sense of loss for something I couldn't name. And Lily, our perfect baby, started to struggle. She cried more, slept less, seemed perpetually uncomfortable. The pediatrician found nothing wrong, but we could see she was unhappy. One night at 3:33 a.m., always 3:33, I noticed. I got up to comfort Lily and found myself standing outside the sealed nursery. I didn't remember walking there. I put my hand on the door and felt something, a vibration, a pulse, almost like a heartbeat. And I understood. Mrs. Patterson was right. The house had memories. The room had longings. And we'd rejected it, sealed it away, denied it the only thing it wanted. To be near a child. To remember what it was supposed to be. It wasn't trying to harm Lily. It was trying to connect. To fulfill its purpose. To be what it was meant to be. A room where a child grew and played and dreamed. By sealing it away, we'd wounded it. and the house was responding to that wound with grief so profound. It was affecting all of us. I made a decision that Rachel would probably argue with, but in that moment, it felt absolutely right. I unsealed the door and opened it. The nursery was dark and cold. I turned on the light. Everything was as we'd left it. Crib, changing table, rocking chair, mobile. I sat in the rocking chair and spoke to the empty room. I know you're here. I know you're lonely. I know you want to be part of Lily's life. Silence. But I felt a shift in the air, a attention focusing on me. You can't have her all to yourself. You can't watch her every night, move her mobile, enter our dreams. That's not okay. That's not how this works. I waited, unsure if I was talking to something real or just processing my own fear and exhaustion. But maybe we can compromise. Maybe we can use this room during the day. Read to her here. Play here. Let you be part of her life in a way that feels safe for us. The mobile above the crib began to turn, slowly, gently. Not the violent spinning from before, but peaceful, like a response, like agreement. At night, she stays with us, in our room. But during the day, this can be her playroom. You can watch her grow, hear her laugh, see her learn. Just no more nightmares. No more sleepwalking. No more frightening us. The temperature in the room shifted. The cold began to recede, replaced by something warmer. Not quite comfortable, but no longer hostile. I sat there for a long time, rocking in the chair, feeling the room settle around me. When I finally returned to bed, Rachel was awake. Where were you? Talking to the house, I said, and explained what I'd done. To my surprise, she didn't object. Do you think it worked? I don't know. But it felt right. The next morning, we brought Lily into the nursery for the first time in weeks. We laid her on a blanket on the floor, surrounded by toys, and sat nearby watching her. She smiled. Not gas, not a reflex. A real smile, her first one, lighting up her entire face. And in that moment, the room felt complete. Like it had been waiting for exactly this. A child's joy, a child's presence. The fulfillment of its long, deferred purpose. We started using the nursery every day. Morning playtime, afternoon reading, evening songs before bed. But at night, Lily slept in our room. The nightmares stopped. The oppressive sadness lifted from the house. Rachel stopped sleepwalking. And the shadow. I still saw it sometimes, moving along the walls while Lily played. But now it seemed different, less menacing, more watchful in a protective way. Like a guardian rather than a threat. Months passed. Lily grew, reached milestones, became a toddler. She loved the nursery, would crawl to the door and pat it, asking to go in. Sometimes she'd laugh at nothing, staring at empty corners, seeing something we couldn't. Rachel and I stopped talking about moving. The house had settled. Whatever presence inhabited, that room had found peace in our compromise. But I never forgot what it was. Never fully trusted it. I was vigilant, always watching, always ready to intervene if the shadow ever moved too close. If the mobile ever spun too fast, if anything ever seemed wrong. Because the thing about compromises with forces you don't understand is that you never really know if they'll hold. You never know if the loneliness might return, if the longing might intensify, if watching might stop being enough. Last week, something happened that brought all my fears rushing back. Lily is 3 now, talking in full sentences, sleeping in a regular bed in our room, because she's still not quite ready for her own space at night. But she spends hours in the nursery during the day. It's her favorite room in the house. We were having dinner when she looked up at me with her big brown eyes and asked, "Daddy, who's the shadow friend?" My fork clattered onto my plate. What? The shadow friend. In my room. They watch me play. They make the mobile spin. Rachel and I exchanged looks of pure terror. "Lily," Rachel said carefully, "there's no one in that room but you when you play. The shadow friend. They hide when you come in. They're shy." What does the shadow friend look like?" I asked. Lily thought about this, her face scrunched in concentration. They're tall and thin, and they don't have a real face, just dark. But they're nice. They like my toys. They like when I sing. Have they ever touched you? My voice was shaking. No, they just watch. And sometimes they wave. I wanted to seal the room again immediately, to never let Lily in there again. But Rachel put her hand on mine under the table, a silent message to stay calm, not to frighten Lily. "That's interesting, sweetie," Rachel said. "But you know, shadows can't really be friends. They're just shadows. But this one is different," Lily insisted. "This one remembers. Remembers what? All the children who never came. It's very sad about them." The room went cold. Those weren't words of 3. Year-old should know. Those weren't concepts she could understand on her own. After Lily was in bed, Rachel and I had an emergency conference in the kitchen. "It's talking to her," I said. "Somehow it's communicating with her. She's not scared. She seems to think of it as a friend. That might be worse. What if it's manipulating her? Getting her to trust it so it can. Can what? It's had 3 years to hurt her. It hasn't. Yet. We decided to set up the camera again, hidden this time, to see what Lily saw when she claimed the shadow was there. The next day, while Lily played in the nursery, we watched the live feed from our bedroom. The room appeared normal. Lily on the floor with her dolls, talking to them, singing little songs. Nothing unusual. Then, she looked up at the corner. The same corner where I'd always seen the shadow retreat. She said, waving. "Do you want to play?" She paused, as if listening. "Okay, I'll show you my new doll. Her name is Emma." She held up her doll toward the empty corner. On the monitor, we could see nothing there, just an empty space. But then, as we watched, the light in that corner seemed to dim. Not dramatically, just subtly, as if something had moved between the light source and the wall. A shadow that shouldn't exist. Lily giggled. "You like her. I like her too. Mommy got her for me." Another pause. "Yes, Mommy and Daddy are very nice. They take care of me." A longer pause. and Lily's expression became serious. "Why are you sad?" My heart was pounding. Whatever this thing was, it was having a conversation with my daughter. A real two-way conversation. "You miss the children who didn't come, the ones you were waiting for." Rachel gripped my arm. "I'm sorry you were lonely for so long," Lily said. "But I'm here now. You don't have to be lonely anymore." The shadow in the corner moved. We could see it now on the monitor. A darker patch sliding along the wall. It moved closer to Lily. I was on my feet immediately, running toward the nursery. But Rachel called out, "Wait." Look, on the monitor, the shadow had stopped a few feet from Lily. It wasn't approaching threateningly. It was almost hesitant, uncertain. Lily reached her hand toward it. "It's okay. You can be my friend. I don't mind that you're different." The shadow retreated slightly. "You're afraid you'll hurt me. You won't. You never have. You're very gentle." I watched, paralyzed, as my 3-year-old daughter comforted something that had haunted my nightmares for 3 years. "Everyone needs a friend," Lily said. "Even shadows. Especially shadows." The darkness in the corner seemed to pulse, and for just a moment, on the monitor, I could swear I saw a shape within it. Not quite human, but humanoid, reaching out toward my daughter with something that might have been a hand. But it didn't touch her. It stopped just short, hovering in the space between them. "I have to go eat lunch now," Lily said, standing up. "But I'll come back after my nap. Okay. We can play more then." She walked out of the nursery and found us standing in the hallway, both pale and shaken.
"Hi, Mommy!"
"Hi."
"Daddy!"
I was talking to the shadow friend. "They're very nice, but very sad." Rachel knelt down to Lily's level. "Sweetie, we need to talk about the shadow friend." "It's okay, Mommy. They won't hurt me. They love children. They've always loved children. That's why they're so sad. They never got to know any until I came." "How do you know all this?" I asked. "They tell me. Not with words like we use. With feelings. They show me pictures in my head of this room, empty for so many years. Waiting and waiting. They thought they'd wait forever." She said it so matter-of-factly, as if she were describing what she'd learned in preschool, rather than communications with an entity of unknown origin and intent. Over the following days, we tried to discourage Lily from interacting with the shadow. We suggested playing in other rooms, offered new toys to entice her elsewhere. But she kept returning to the nursery, kept having her one-sided hour to our eyes conversations, and the shadow became bolder. I'd see it now, even when I was in the room with Lily. It no longer hid from us. It would move along the walls while Lily played, seeming to observe to watch over her. Once, when Lily tripped and fell, the mobile above, where the crib used to be, spun rapidly, and Lily looked up at it and said, "I'm okay. Don't worry. It didn't hurt." The mobile slowed. The shadow was worried about her, protective of her. I didn't know whether that was reassuring or terrifying. 3 nights ago, I had a dream. I was in the nursery, but it looked different. Older, from a different time. and there was a woman there, young, maybe in her 20s, sitting in the rocking chair. She was crying, her hand on her flat stomach. "Please," she whispered, "please let there be a child. Let this room have a purpose. Let me have a purpose." But the room remained empty. The years passed. The woman grew older, stopped coming to the room, locked the door on her grief. And the room remembered. The longing soaked into the walls, into the very structure of the space. An intention so strong it persisted, took on a kind of life of its own. Not a ghost. Ghosts are dead things. This was something that never got to live in the first place. An absence that became a presence. I woke from the dream with tears on my face, filled with a crushing sadness that wasn't entirely my own. I understood then what we were dealing with. Not a monster, not a threat, but something broken and incomplete, sustained only by longing and the hope that someday, somehow, it might fulfill the purpose it was meant for. Yesterday, Rachel and I made a decision. We moved Lily's bed into the nursery. It was terrifying. Everything in us as parents screamed against it. But Lily was getting older, needed her own space, and the shadow had proven itself over 3 years to be not a danger, but a guardian. More than that, it loved her. In its own incomprehensible way, it loved her. Last night was her first night sleeping in the nursery. We set up the monitor, promised we'd check on her every hour, left her door and ours open. At 3:33 a.m., I still noticed the time. I woke and checked the monitor. Lily was asleep, peaceful, her breathing steady and calm. And on the wall behind her bed, the shadow was there, large and watchful, like a dark sentinel keeping guard. As I watched, it moved slightly, adjusting as if making sure it could see her clearly, making sure she was safe. I should have been afraid. Any sane parent would be. But instead, I felt something else. Gratitude. Whatever this thing was, it had waited a lifetime for this, for a child in the room it was meant to protect. And now that it finally had one, it would guard her with everything it was. This morning, Lily bounced into our room, bright-eyed and excited. "I slept so good!" The shadow friend watched me all night. They said I smiled in my sleep. Did they? Rachel asked, her voice tight.
"Yes."
And they said thank you for letting me stay in their room. They said they'll take very good care of me. She ran off to play, leaving Rachel and I sitting in bed, trying to process our new reality. We just gave our daughter to a shadow. Rachel whispered. "No," I said, though I wasn't entirely sure. "We shared her with something that needed her. That's different." "Is it?" I didn't have an answer. Lily is 4 now. The shadow is still there, still watching over her. She talks to it daily, shares her secrets, her fears, her joys. She's not afraid of the dark. How could she be, when the dark is her friend? Sometimes I worry that we've made a terrible mistake, that we've allowed something to bond with our daughter, that we don't understand, that we can't control. Other times, I think about how the shadow has never harmed her, how it spins the mobile when she's sad, how it dims when she needs to sleep, how it seems to pulse with concern when she cries. I think about Mrs. Patterson and her years of longing, and how that longing might have echoed through time, creating something that was neither alive nor dead, neither real nor imaginary, but somewhere in between. And I wonder if maybe, in our way, we did something good. We gave purpose to something that had none. We filled a void that had ached for generations. We allowed something incomplete to finally, in its limited way, become whole. But late at night, when I check the monitor and see the shadow looming large on Lily's wall, I wonder if the price of that kindness will be more than we can bear. Because Lily is getting older. And someday, she'll grow up. She'll move out. She'll leave. What happens to the shadow then, when the room is empty again, when the longing returns? Will it accept the loss gracefully, grateful for the years it had? Or will it reach out again, searching, pulling, trying to draw her back to the room where it waits, where it's always waited, where it will always wait? I don't know. All I know is that yesterday, Lily came to me with a drawing. It showed her in bed, a large dark shape behind her, and above the shape she'd written in her careful, newly learned letters, M-Y-F-I-N-D-O-H-O, Lovis Mimi. It's beautiful. Sweetie, I told her, hanging it on the refrigerator like I would any other childhood drawing. But my hands were shaking as I did it, because in the corner of the picture, barely visible, she'd drawn another bed, an empty bed, and next to it, the same dark shape, but smaller, hunched, alone. I asked her what that part meant. She looked at me with her innocent eyes and said, "That's the shadow friend before I came. When they were lonely. They never want to be lonely again, Daddy. Never ever." The certainty in her voice chilled me. That night, I stood in the doorway of the nursery, watching Lily sleep, watching the shadow watch her. And I made a silent promise to that darkness. You can watch her. You can care for her. You can be her friend. But you can never keep her. When she's ready to leave, you have to let her go. The shadow moved slightly on the wall, a ripple of motion I chose to interpret as acknowledgement. But I couldn't be sure. And that uncertainty sits with me every day, every night. Every time I see the darkness in my daughter's room, because I've made a deal with something I don't fully understand, and I won't know if I chose wisely until it's too late to change my mind. For now, Lily is happy. The house is peaceful. The shadow has found its purpose. But I keep wondering at what cost. And more frightening, what will the shadow do to keep what it's finally found? Last week, Lily whispered to me at bedtime, "Daddy," the shadow friend says, "I'm the most important thing that ever happened to them. They say they'll never let anything bad happen to me." I told her that was nice, that it was good to have someone looking out for her. But what I didn't say, what I kept locked inside, was the other interpretation of those words. They'll never let anything bad happen to her, including losing her, including letting her go. I lie awake at night now, listening to the house settle, thinking about the choice we made. thinking about the shadow growing more attached to my daughter with each passing day, thinking about what might happen when she tries to leave for college, for a life of her own, for the independence every parent wants their child to have. Will the shadow understand? Will it accept the natural order of growing up and moving on? Or will it reach out with whatever power it has, pull her back, keep her close, trapped in that room to satisfy a longing that has waited over a century to be fulfilled? I don't know. I pray I never have to find out. But I watch. I'm always watching now. The shadow watches Lily, and I watch them both. Waiting for the moment when love becomes possession, when protection becomes prison, when the friend in the dark becomes the thing we should have feared all along. That moment hasn't come yet. Maybe it never will. But I see it in my nightmares. Lily grown, packing for college, the shadow on the wall growing larger, darker, more desperate. And I hear my daughter's voice, calm and certain, saying what she always says, "It's okay. They love me. They would never hurt me." Right up until the moment she tries to leave. And then we'll see if love is enough to let go, or if loneliness is stronger than we ever imagined. Story 5. I first saw it in the bathroom mirror at 3 a.m. Insomnia had become my companion those months, keeping me company through the silent hours when the city pretended to sleep. I developed routines to pass the time. Reading, walking through empty rooms, washing my face with cold water to shock away the exhaustion that wouldn't quite tip over into rest. That night, I was leaning over the sink, water dripping from my chin, when I looked up and saw the shadow behind me. Not my shadow. Mine was where it should be, cast by the overhead light, pooling around my feet in the expected way. This other shadow stood in the corner of the mirror's reflection, separate and distinct. Dark red, the color of blood left to dry. It had no source, no person, no object casting it. Just the shadow itself, standing upright like a silhouette cut from crimson paper. I spun around. The bathroom was empty. Only white tiles and the hum of the ventilation fan. When I looked back at the mirror, the shadow was gone. Fatigue, I told myself. My mind playing tricks after too many sleepless nights. I dried my face and went back to bed, pushing the image away. But sleep wouldn't come. I kept seeing that shadow, the way it had stood there, so still, so patient. The way it had seemed to be looking at me, even though it had no eyes. The next morning, I saw it again. I was brushing my teeth, foam white against my lips, when movement in the mirror caught my attention. The shadow was there again, but not in the corner this time. It stood directly behind my reflection, overlapping with where a person would be, if someone were standing right behind me. The red was deeper in the daylight, more visceral, like fresh blood, still wet, still warm. My toothbrush clattered into the sink. I whirled around, heart hammering. Nothing, just empty space and morning, light streaming through the window. The mirror showed my pale face, foam on my chin, fear in my eyes. And behind my reflection, nothing at all. The shadow had vanished again. I started avoiding mirrors. It wasn't easy. They're everywhere once you start trying to dodge them. Storefront windows, car side mirrors, polished elevator doors. The black screen of your phone when it's turned off. I found myself walking with my eyes down, taking stairs instead of elevators, leaving my phone face up on surfaces. But the shadow found me anyway. 3 days after the first sighting, I caught a glimpse of it in a shop window as I passed. Not behind me this time, but beside me, walking in perfect sync with my stride. A companion made of red darkness, matching my pace step for step. When I stopped, it stopped. When I moved faster, so did it. I forced myself to look directly at the window. My reflection looked back, alone and normal, but in the periphery of my vision, I could see it. The moment I tried to focus on it directly, it vanished. Only in the corner of my eye did it exist, this impossible shadow that had no body to cast it. That night, I researched. Hours of searching through forums, paranormal sites, folklore archives. I found stories of shadow people, of dark figures that appeared in peripheral vision. But none of them were red. None of them were shadows without bodies. Most were described as malevolent, harbingers of disaster or death. I found one account, buried in an obscure blog from 7 years ago, that made my blood run cold. The blood shadow, it read, appears only in reflections. It has no physical form, existing only in the mirror world. The reverse realm we glimpse when we see our own faces looking back, once it attaches itself to you. It follows through every reflective surface, growing clearer and closer with each sighting. The legend says it's searching for something it lost. A body to anchor itself to reality. When it gets close enough, when the boundary between reflection and real becomes thin enough, it will try to cross over, and when it does, the post ended there. No conclusion. No explanation of what happens when the shadow crosses over. The blog had been abandoned. No new posts for years. I tried to find the author, but the contact information led nowhere. Dead ends and deleted accounts. I started noticing other things. The shadow was getting closer. That first night, it had been in the corner of the mirror, then behind me, then beside me. Now, when I caught glimpses of it, it was ahead of me, leading the way, and it was clearer too, more defined. I could almost make out features in the red darkness. The suggestion of shoulders, of a head, of hands. It was taking shape, becoming more real with each reflection. I covered the mirrors in my apartment with sheets and towels, turned my phone to the lowest brightness, wore sunglasses to shield my eyes from accidental reflections. But you can't hide from every mirror in a city. They're built into the architecture, woven into the fabric of modern life. The shadow was always there, waiting in the glass. A week after the first sighting, something changed. I was walking past a puddle. Couldn't avoid it. The street was too crowded. When I saw the shadow's reflection in the water. But this time, I saw more than just the silhouette. I saw eyes, dark holes in the red shadow, looking up at me from the puddle's surface, looking at me with recognition. with hunger. I ran, dodging through crowds, not caring where I was going, just trying to put distance between myself and that puddle, those eyes. But every window I passed showed me the shadow, every car mirror, every polished surface. And in each one, the eyes were clearer, more focused. The shadow was learning to see me, truly see me, not just follow. I ended up in a subway station, breathing hard, pressed against a tiled wall. The platform was nearly empty, just me and an old woman sitting on a bench, and a teenager absorbed in his phone. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in sick yellow tones. Across the platform, on the opposite wall, was a large advertisement with a glossy, reflective surface. In it, I could see myself, distorted slightly by the curve of the protective plastic. And there, next to my reflection, was the shadow. But it wasn't beside me anymore. It was in front of me, between my reflection and the surface of the advertisement. It was crossing over. I watched, paralyzed, as the shadow pressed against the reflective surface from the other side, like someone pressing their hands against glass. The red darkness bulged outward, straining against some invisible barrier between the reflection world and reality. The eyes fixed on me, intense and focused, and I understood with sudden, terrible clarity what it wanted. It wanted out, wanted to be real, and it had chosen me as the doorway. Off the train arrived with a rush of hot air and screaming metal. I stumbled aboard, not caring what direction it was going, just needing to move. The doors closed. The train lurched forward. Through the windows, I watched the platform slide away, the advertisement receding into the distance. But the shadow was in the train window now. Inside with me. It stood in the glass, facing me instead of mimicking my position. We were looking at each other, separated only by the thin barrier of the reflection. It raised one hand. I could see the shape of fingers now, 5 distinct digits pressed against the glass. On the other side of the window, the tunnel walls rushed past in darkness. I looked around the car. The other passengers seemed oblivious, absorbed in their phones or staring blankly at nothing. Couldn't they see it? Couldn't they see this impossible thing standing in the reflection? Or maybe they had their own shadows. Maybe everyone did, following them through the mirror world, and I was only now aware enough to see mine. The thought made me look at the other reflections in the train windows. And yes, there they were. Shadows behind each person, some faint, some clearer. Most were normal shadow colors, gray and black. But a few were like mine, red and growing clearer. One woman had a shadow that was almost solid, almost real, pressed so close to her reflection that they were nearly touching. She looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept in weeks. I wondered how long she'd been living with her shadow, how much longer she had before it found a way through. The train stopped at the next station. The doors opened. I stepped out onto the platform, and the shadow followed, gliding through the reflective surfaces like a fish through water. to a train window, to play platform signs, to the metal doors of the elevator, to the glossy tiles in the station bathroom. It was everywhere I looked, and it was getting impatient. That night, I didn't go home. I walked the streets until dawn, avoiding every reflective surface I could. But exhaustion was making me careless. I stumbled, my eyes blurring, and before I could stop myself, I was looking into the dark window of a closed shop. The shadow was right there, right against the glass. So close I could see details I'd never noticed before. The texture of what might have been clothing, the shape of what might have been a face. And those eyes, no longer just holes in the darkness, but actual eyes, red irises swimming in darker red, looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Anger, desperation, longing. It mouthed something. I saw the lips move, saw the words form, but no sound came through. The reflection was silent, except for my own harsh breathing. I tried to read its lips. One word, repeated over and over. Help. My blood went cold. It was asking for help. This thing that had been stalking me through mirrors, that had been getting closer and more real with each passing day. It was asking me to help it. But help it do what? Cross over. Become real. Take my place. I turned away from the window and ran again. But I was so tired. So very tired. My legs felt like lead. My lungs burned, and still I ran, because stopping meant looking, and looking meant seeing the shadow, and seeing it meant giving it another chance to cross over. I found myself in a park as the sun began to rise. The duck pond was still, its surface like glass, and I was too exhausted to avoid it. I collapsed on a bench at the water's edge and stared at the reflection below. The shadow was there, of course, but in the dawn light, something was different. I could see through it, just barely. Could see the suggestion of what lay beneath the red darkness. And what I saw made me understand everything. It was me. Not my current self, but another version. A reflection that had somehow become separated, trapped in the mirror world, while I lived in the real one. I could see my own features in the shape of the shadow's face, my own body in the way it moved. This was my reflection, somehow given independence, somehow made aware of its own existence. And it had been trying to get back ever since. How long had we been separated? I tried to remember the first time I'd felt truly alone, truly isolated. Months ago, maybe longer. That period when I'd stopped recognizing myself in photographs, when my own face had started to look strange and unfamiliar. Had that been when it happened? When my reflection had somehow split off and become its own entity. The shadow in the pond's surface was reaching up toward me, its hand breaking through the reflection in ripples. I could see my own hand in its gesture, could recognize the scar on the knuckle from a childhood accident, the way the fingers curved slightly inward. This was me, reaching out from the other side, trying to come home. I looked at my own hand, solid and real in the morning light. Then at the shadow's hand, pressing against the surface of the water from below. The barrier between us was so thin now, barely there at all. one touch, and we would merge again, become whole again. But which one of us would be in control? Which one would be the reflection, and which the real thing? I reached toward the water, my fingertips hovering just above the surface. The shadow's hand rose to meet mine, separated by only a few millimeters of water, of reality, of the barrier between two worlds. In the reflection, I could see the shadow's face clearly now. My face, looking up at me with exhaustion and hope and desperate need. We had been separated for so long. It was time to be whole again. My finger touched the water. The surface rippled, breaking the reflection into fragments. And in that moment of contact, I felt something change. A pull, a shifting, like the world tilting on its axis. The boundary between reflection and reality wavered, thinned, began to dissolve. I don't know which of us crossed over. I don't know if I pulled my reflection out of the mirror world, or if it pulled me in. All I know is that the world inverted, folded, and then snapped back into place. And I was standing by the pond, whole again. No shadow following me through mirrors. No red silhouette tracking my every move. Just me, solid and real, in the morning light. But something felt wrong. I looked down at my hands and saw that they cast no shadow in the sunlight. The bench, the trees, the lamp posts, all of them had shadows stretching across the grass. But I stood shadowless, as if the sun's light passed through me, without finding anything solid to block. I walked to the pond and looked at my reflection in the still water. I looked normal, solid, real, but when I moved, my reflection was slow to follow, lagging behind by a heartbeat. And in its eyes, I saw something that made my chest tighten. Recognition and pity. I live in the real world now. I eat and sleep and work and smile at people on the street. But sometimes, when I pass a mirror, I catch a glimpse of red in the corner of my eye. And I wonder which side of the glass I'm really on. I wonder if I ever left the mirror world at all. Or if my reflection is living my life now, solid and real, while I'm the one trapped in the surfaces, following along behind, trying to remember what it felt like to cast a shadow. The blood shadow still appears in mirrors, you see. But now it's on my side, walking behind me, always behind me, matching my steps. And every day, it gets a little more solid, a little more real. One day, someone else will see it in their mirror, and the cycle will begin again. But for now, I walk through the city, shadowless in the sunlight, and try to remember which side of reality I belong to. Try to remember if this life I'm living is mine, or if I'm just another reflection pretending to be real. The mirrors know the truth. They always do. That's why I still avoid them, even though the shadow is gone. Or maybe not gone. Maybe just on the other side now. Maybe waiting for the barrier to thin again. For another moment when the real and reflected worlds can swap places. Maybe waiting for me to touch another surface of water and let it come home again. I don't look at my reflection anymore if I can help it. Because when I do, I see something in those eyes that wasn't there before. something red and patient and aware, something that knows it's only a matter of time before we trade places again. And the question that keeps me awake at night, through all those silent hours when the city pretends to sleep, is this: when we do trade places, will I even notice the difference? Or have we been trading back and forth so many times already that I can't remember which side I started on? Which reflection was the original? Which shadow belongs to whom? The blood follows me through the mirror world, a red reminder that I am not quite real, not quite solid, not quite here. And someday, someone will see me in their mirror, a shadow without a body, pressing against the glass, mouthing that one word over and over: help. But by then, I won't remember what I need help with. Won't remember which side of the mirror is the prison and which is freedom. I'll just keep walking through the reflections, rolling through the city, like a shadow in search of its body, like a body in search of its shadow, forever separated, forever reaching, forever just on the other side of the glass. Hey, Story 6. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday, slipped under my apartment door while I was at work. Heavy cream paper, expensive feeling, with embossed lettering that caught the light. The Westwood Gallery requests your presence for a private viewing of the Thornton collection. Tuesday evening, 8 p.m. Attendance by invitation only. No RSVP information, no address. Though I knew where the Westwood was, an old building on the edge of the arts district that I'd passed countless times, but never entered. I should have thrown it away. Should have recognized the strangeness of receiving a personal invitation to a place I'd never visited, for a collection I'd never heard of. But I'd been feeling invisible lately, lost in the routine of work and empty apartment, and the peculiar loneliness of living in a city full of people. The invitation felt like a doorway, a momentary break in the pattern. So I went. The Westwood Gallery stood alone on its block, flanked by empty lots where buildings had been demolished and nothing new had risen to replace them. The facade was older than I'd realized, maybe 19th century, all ornate stonework and arched windows that glowed softly in the evening light. A single lamp burned above the entrance, illuminating the brass plaque beside the door, Westwood Gallery, Est, 1867. The door was unlocked. It opened silently on well-oiled hinges, revealing a dim hallway that smelled of old wood and linseed oil. My footsteps echoed on the marble floor, impossibly loud in the silence. No one greeted me. No other visitors' voices drifted from deeper in the building. Just the echo of my own presence, announcing me to empty rooms. The hallway opened into a grand entrance hall, all dark wood paneling and a sweeping staircase that curved upward into shadows. A small placard on an easel read, "The Thornton Collection, 2nd floor." An arrow pointed up the stairs. I climbed slowly, one hand on the polished banister. The wood was warm under my palm, almost body temperature, and I found myself thinking about how many hands had touched this rail over the past 150 years. How many visitors had climbed these stairs to view exhibitions long since dismantled and forgotten. The second floor was dimmer than below, lit only by small picture lights above each painting. They lined the walls of a long gallery, maybe 20 pieces in all, arranged in careful intervals. Traditional portraits mostly, from various eras. Renaissance, Baroque, Victorian. Men in formal dress, women in elaborate gowns, children with solemn faces too old for their years. The silence was absolute. Not the quiet of an empty building, but a deeper silence, as if sound itself had been absorbed into the walls. My breathing seemed muted, my footsteps on the hardwood floor barely audible. Even the city noise that should have filtered through the windows was absent, leaving only this vacuum of sound that pressed against my eardrums. I approached the first painting. A man in 18th century dress, powdered wig slightly askew, eyes dark and intelligent. The placard read, "Portrait of Edmund Westwood, 1782, artist unknown." The gallery's founder, perhaps. His gaze seemed to follow me as I moved. A common trick of portrait painting, but executed with unsettling skill. Those eyes held depth, personality, a sense of presence that made the hairs on my neck stand up. I moved to the next painting. A woman in a blue dress, pale hands folded in her lap, a slight smile playing at her lips. Portrait of Catherine Marsh, 1845, artist unknown. Again, that sense of being watched, of the painted eyes tracking my movement. I told myself it was just good technique. The artist's skill in creating the illusion of life. But the smile bothered me. It was wrong somehow, asymmetrical in a way that suggested not artistic error, but deliberate choice. Like the artist had captured a moment of secret amusement, a private joke at the viewer's expense. The third painting stopped me cold. It was a portrait of a young man, maybe 25, in modern dress. Not modern by painting standards. I mean actually modern. He wore a button, down shirt and jeans, leaning against a wall that looked like it could have been from this very building. The style was photorealistic, every detail precise and clear. His expression was neutral, almost bored, but his eyes were intense, focused, looking directly at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. The placard said, "Portrait of Michael Chen, 2019. Artist unknown. 6 years ago." This was a recent work, far newer than the others surrounding it. And the name, Michael Chen. Common enough, but it sent a chill through me anyway. I'd known a Michael Chen once, years ago. A casual acquaintance from college who had drifted out of my life the way most people do. I tried to remember what he'd looked like. The details were hazy, but the more I looked at this portrait, the more familiar it became. I pulled out my phone to search for him on social media to see if this could possibly be the same person. But my phone screen stayed dark. Dead battery, even though it had been fully charged when I arrived. A sound broke the silence. Soft, barely audible, but unmistakable in the absolute quiet of the gallery. Breathing, not my own. This came from behind me, deep and slow and measured. I spun around. The gallery was empty, just me and the paintings. their subjects staring down from their frames with those two aware eyes. But I'd heard it. I was certain I'd heard it. I walked quickly to the next painting, trying to shake off the unease, creeping up my spine. An older woman in Victorian mourning dress, her face gaunt and severe. Her eyes were red-rimmed, as if she'd been crying, but her expression was hard, unforgiving. The placard read, Portrait of Agnes Thornton, 1867. Artist unknown. Thornton. The same name as the collection. I looked back at the painting of Edmund Westwood, then at this one, trying to see a family resemblance. Perhaps Agnes was his daughter, his granddaughter. As I stared at her portrait, I noticed something odd. Her hand, resting on the arm of her chair, seemed to be positioned strangely. The fingers were curled, not in a natural resting position, but as if they were gripping something. But the canvas showed only empty air where her hand closed. I leaned closer, examining the brushwork. There was something there, I realized. A faint discoloration in the paint, as if something had been painted over. An object removed from the composition, leaving only the hand that had held it. Another sound. Closer this time. The whisper of fabric against fabric, like someone shifting their weight, adjusting their clothing. I backed away from the painting, my heart hammering. Hello. My voice came out small and uncertain. Is someone there? No answer. Just the silence rushing back in, filling the space my voice had occupied. I should have left then. Should have walked quickly back down the stairs and out into the street. Away from this place and its two quiet rooms and its paintings with their two real eyes. But something kept me moving forward through the gallery, from portrait to portrait, as if I were following a path laid out specifically for me. The next few paintings were older again, medieval nobles, Renaissance merchants, Baroque aristocrats, all staring out from their frames with that same unsettling intensity. And I began to notice other things, small details that seemed wrong. A man's shadow falling in the wrong direction relative to the light source. A woman's reflection in a mirror behind her, showing a different expression than her face. A child's hand with 6 fingers instead of 5. Mistakes or messages. Deliberate choices by the artist to signal that something was deeply wrong with these portraits. I reached the halfway point of the gallery and found another modern painting. A woman this time, sitting in what looked like a coffee shop, laptop open in front of her, staring directly at the viewer. Portrait of Sarah Kim, 2021. Artist unknown. My breath caught. I knew that name too. Sarah Kim had lived in my building 2 years ago, in the apartment above mine. I'd seen her in the elevator sometimes, exchanged brief pleasantries. She'd moved out suddenly. Middle of the night, leaving behind furniture and personal belongings. The landlord had been confused, unable to contact her, like she'd simply vanished. I stared at her portrait, and I swear, her eyes blinked. Just once. A quick flutter of painted eyelids, there and gone so fast I could almost believe I'd imagined it. But my racing heart told me I hadn't imagined anything. Something was wrong with these paintings. Something was very, very wrong. I moved faster now, checking each placard, each date, each name. More familiar names appeared. People I'd known or known of, spanning decades. A teacher from high school, dated 1998. A neighbor from childhood, dated 2005. People who had disappeared from my life, sometimes gradually, sometimes suddenly, and the dates kept getting more recent. 2022, 2023, 2024. The most recent painting was at the end of the gallery, positioned where it would be the last thing a visitor saw before descending the stairs. I approached it slowly, afraid of what I would find. It was a portrait of David Martinez. Dated 3 months ago. David had been my coworker. Had sat in the cubicle next to mine until he'd stopped showing up to work. No explanation, no goodbye. Just an empty desk and unanswered calls. We'd assumed he'd gotten another job and hadn't bothered to give notice. But here he was, immortalized in oil paint, staring out from the canvas with terror in his eyes. Unlike the other portraits, David wasn't posed. He looked like he'd been captured mid-movement, mouth open as if shouting, one hand raised as if to ward something off. And his eyes. His eyes were looking at something beyond the frame, something that filled him with absolute horror. I heard the breathing again, right behind me now. Close enough that I could feel the warmth of it on the back of my neck. I didn't turn around. Couldn't turn around. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but my legs wouldn't move. I stood frozen before David's portrait, feeling that presence behind me, knowing with terrible certainty that if I turned, I would see something I couldn't unsee. A hand touched my shoulder. Not a real hand. The touch was too light, too cold, like fingers made of air, barely substantial, but definitely there, definitely touching me. You came, a voice whispered, neither male nor female, neither young nor old. The same quality as the touch, present but not quite real. We've been waiting for you. I managed to turn my head slightly, just enough to see from the corner of my eye. The gallery behind me was no longer empty. Figures stood among the paintings, shadowy and indistinct, as if they were made of the same dim light that illuminated the portraits. And as I watched, they became clearer, more solid, more real. They were the people from the paintings, all of them. Edmund Westwood in his powdered wig, Catherine Marsh in her blue dress, Agnes Thornton in her mourning blacks, Michael Chen in his jeans, Sarah Kim with her laptop, David Martinez with terror frozen on his face. All of them stepping out from their frames, becoming three-dimensional, becoming present. The gallery needs new subjects. The voice continued, and I realized it was coming from all of them at once, a chorus speaking in unison. The collection must grow. It's been growing for so long, visitor by visitor, year by year. Everyone who comes alone, who enters without witnesses, who accepts the invitation. I tried to speak, but my throat was closed with fear. The figures moved closer, surrounding me in a loose circle. I could see through them still. Could see the paintings on the walls, but they were becoming more opaque with each passing moment. more real. The artist is always watching, they said. Always painting. Capturing the moment when you finally understand what you are, what you're becoming. I felt it then. A pulling sensation, as if invisible hands were tugging at my edges, trying to flatten me, to compress me into 2 dimensions. The world began to look different. Colors became more saturated, shadows became absolute blacks, and I could feel my depth diminishing, my substance draining away. I was becoming a painting. Terror gave me strength. I broke from their circle, stumbling toward the stairs, my movements feeling sluggish and strange, as if I were wading through oil paint. The figures didn't chase me. They simply watched, their expressions patient, as I ran for the staircase. But the stairs were wrong. They stretched downward impossibly far. Dozens of flights instead of the single one I'd climbed. And the walls were lined with more paintings now, hundreds of them, thousands stretching down into darkness, all portraits, all staring. I ran anyway, taking the steps 2 at a time, feeling my body becoming lighter, less substantial with each floor I descended. My feet made no sound on the marble. My breathing had become silent. Even my heartbeat was fading, as if it were being painted over, replaced with the stillness of oil on canvas. Finally, I reached the entrance hall. The front door was just ahead, still showing the street beyond through its glass panels. Real light, real air. The real world where things were solid and 3-dimensional and not trapped in frames. I grabbed the door handle. It felt wrong under my palm, too smooth, too flat. But I pulled, put all my remaining strength into it, and the door opened. I fell through into the street and lay gasping on the pavement. Above me, the sky was dark and full of stars. Around me, the city hummed with life, cars passing, distant voices, the sound of music from a bar down the block. Real sounds, real life. I'd made it out. I stood on shaking legs and looked back at the gallery. The windows were dark now, the entrance lamp extinguished. It looked abandoned, forgotten, a relic that no one had visited in years. The brass plaque was tarnished and unreadable. But I knew what I'd seen, knew what had almost happened. I walked home in a daze, checking my reflection in every window I passed, making sure I was still 3-dimensional, still casting a proper shadow, still existing in the real world. That was 3 weeks ago. I thought I was safe, thought I'd escaped. But small things have been happening, strange things. Yesterday, someone asked me if I was feeling okay, said I looked flat. This morning, I noticed my shadow looked wrong, too sharp, too defined, like it had been drawn rather than cast. And last night, I found another invitation under my door. The Westwood Gallery requests your presence for the completion of your portrait. Your attendance is required. No date this time. No time. Just the simple statement of inevitability. I haven't looked in a mirror today. I'm afraid of what I might see. Afraid that my features are becoming simplified, my colors more saturated, my depth fading. Afraid that I'm becoming the thing I saw in David Martinez's portrait. A person caught mid, transformation, suspended between reality and representation. The invitation sits on my table, cream, colored and heavy and waiting. I know I'll go back. I don't have a choice. The gallery isn't finished with me. The artist isn't finished with me. Soon, someone else will receive an invitation. They'll climb those stairs and walk through that gallery, and they'll find a new portrait hanging at the end. A recent one dated just days ago. Me, captured in oils, staring out from the canvas with whatever expression will be on my face when the transformation completes. And maybe I'll be there, waiting among the other figures, speaking in that chorus of voices that echo through the silent rooms. Maybe I'll watch as they realize what's happening, as they try to run, as they feel themselves flattening, becoming paint and canvas and frame. Maybe I'll even be the one to whisper, the gallery needs new subjects. The collection must grow. I can feel it happening even now, as I sit here writing this. My fingers moving across the keyboard feel less real, more like the suggestion of fingers, like a painted hand executing painted motion. The room around me is becoming more composed, more deliberate, as if someone is arranging the elements for maximum visual impact. The light falls on my desk at exactly the right angle. The shadows pool in exactly the right places. Everything is becoming too perfect, too deliberate, too much like a carefully composed portrait. And in the corner of my vision, I can see it. A frame, golden and ornate, slowly materializing around my field of view, containing me, defining me, reducing me from person to subject, from living being to artistic representation. The placard has already been written, I'm sure. I know what it will say. Portrait of a My Name 2025 artist unknown. The gallery is always watching, always waiting, always painting. And now it's my turn to join the collection, to hang on those walls, to stare out at the next visitor with warning in my painted eyes. If you receive an invitation, don't go. Don't climb those stairs. Don't enter that silent gallery where the paintings watch and wait. But you will go. I know you will. Because the invitation means you're already part of the collection. You've already been seen, already been chosen, already been started. The artist is very patient, and the gallery has room for so many more. I can barely move now. My body feels fixed in place, posed in this chair, hands on this keyboard, frozen in the act of writing this warning. Soon, I won't be able to move at all. Soon, I'll be entirely still, entirely silent, entirely paint. And then someone will hang me on that wall, in that long gallery, among all the others who answered the invitation. We'll wait together in the silence. We'll watch together as the next visitor climbs the stairs. And we'll all smile our painted smiles as they realize, too late, that they can never leave. The gallery is always open. The collection is always growing. And the artist is always watching. Story 7. The first time I saw one, I thought it was just a hiker. I was 3 days into what was supposed to be a solo 2-week trek through the Cascade Wilderness. A post-breakup healing journey, as my therapist had enthusiastically suggested. Reconnect with nature, David. Find yourself in the silence. The usual therapeutic platitudes that sound profound in an air-conditioned office, but feel hollow when you're alone in millions of acres of forest with nothing but your thoughts. It was standing at the edge of a clearing, maybe 50 yards away. Tall, wearing what looked like a dark jacket and pants, a wide, brimmed hat obscuring its face. Just standing there, motionless, in a way that immediately felt wrong. People don't stand that still. Even when they're resting, humans shift their weight, adjust their posture, make small unconscious movements. This figure was still. Hello. I called out, my voice too loud in the quiet forest. Beautiful day, isn't it? No response, no acknowledgement. The figure didn't move at all, not even to turn toward my voice. I felt the first flutter of unease in my stomach, that primal instinct that something isn't quite right. I decided not to approach, instead turning down a different trail, telling myself I was just being paranoid, that the person was probably lost in thought or listening to music through earbuds. But for the next 2 hours of hiking, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. That night, I set up camp near a small creek, the sound of running water providing a comforting backdrop to the oppressive silence of the deep woods. I built a fire, partially for warmth, partially for the psychological comfort of light. As I sat eating my freeze-dried dinner, I found myself constantly looking up at the tree line, scanning the darkness beyond my small circle of firelight. Nothing. Just shadows and branches and the occasional rustle of some small animal moving through undergrowth. I convinced myself I was being ridiculous. This was exactly the kind of anxiety my therapist had warned about. Taking reasonable caution and amplifying it into paranoia. I was alone in the wilderness, yes, but thousands of people did this every year without incident. I had my bear spray. I knew basic wilderness survival. I was fine. I slept poorly that first night, waking frequently to every sound. Once, around 2 a.m., I could have sworn I heard footsteps circling my tent. Slow, deliberate steps that stopped whenever I held my breath to listen more carefully. But when I finally gathered the courage to unzip the tent and shine my flashlight around the campsite, there was nothing. Just my fire, reduced to glowing embers, and the endless forest pressing in from all sides. Day 4 brought no sign of the strange hiker, and I began to relax. I fell into the rhythm of backcountry travel. Wake at dawn. Break camp, hike until early afternoon, find a good spot for the night, set up, make dinner, sleep. The repetition was meditative. For hours at a time, I'd forget about the breakup, forget about my anxieties. They forget about everything except the simple act of putting one foot in front of the other. I saw the second one on day 5. But this time I knew immediately that something was wrong. It was sitting on a fallen log directly in my path, maybe 30 feet ahead, same dark clothing, same wide-brimmed hat. But what made my blood run cold was the position. It was sitting in a way that looked wrong, like someone who'd never quite learned how sitting works. Its legs were bent at slightly unnatural angles. Its spine was too straight, and its head was tilted at a degree that suggested the neck beneath had more joints than it should. I stopped walking, my hiking poles suddenly feeling inadequate as weapons. "Hello," I called out, less greeting and more question. The figure's head rotated toward me, just the head, the body remaining perfectly still. The movement was smooth, too smooth, like it was mounted on ball bearings rather than vertebrae. I still couldn't see its face under that hat, which struck me as odd. We were in deep forest shadow. Why wear a hat at all? "Are you okay?" I asked, my voice wavering despite my attempt to sound calm. It stood up. The motion was all wrong, too fluid, with none of the small adjustments and shifts of balance that humans make when rising from a seated position. It simply went from sitting to standing in one smooth, unnatural movement. Then it started walking toward me, not in a threatening rush, but with slow, measured steps that were somehow more terrifying than an attack would have been. Each footfall was deliberate, placed with unnatural precision. The arms swung slightly, but the motion was mechanical, like a poorly programmed robot attempting to mimic human movement. I backed away, my rational mind warring with my instincts. Part of me wanted to believe this was just an eccentric hiker, someone with odd mannerisms, nothing to fear. But every animal part of my brain was screaming at me to run. "I don't want any trouble," I said, continuing to back away. "I'm just passing through." The figure kept walking, kept closing the distance between us, and as it moved through a patch of filtered sunlight, I caught my first real glimpse beneath that hat. There was a face, but it was wrong. The features were present. Eyes, nose, mouth. But they looked painted on, or carved, or assembled. Alike. Someone had studied what a human face should look like and recreated it from memory, getting all the pieces right, but missing some fundamental quality that makes a face alive. And the eyes. God, the eyes. They didn't blink. They didn't track or focus. They just stared, flat and empty, like glass marbles pressed into clay. I ran, crashing through undergrowth, tripping over roots, abandoning the trail in my panic. Behind me, I could hear it following, not running, just walking with those same measured, inhuman steps, but somehow keeping pace. Somehow staying just close enough that I could hear it no matter how fast I fled. I ran for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, until my lungs burned and my legs threatened to give out. Finally, I burst into a small clearing and spun around, bear spray in hand, ready to fight. Nothing. The forest was empty, silent. No sign of the figure. I stood there panting, my heart hammering against my ribs, scanning the trees for any sign of movement. Still nothing. Had I lost it? Or had it decided I wasn't worth pursuing? Or, and this thought made my skin crawl, was it simply waiting, watching? I made camp early that night, in the most defensible spot I could find. A small rise with clear sightlines in all directions. I gathered enough firewood to keep a blaze going all night, I kept my bear spray and my knife within easy reach. And I barely slept, starting at every sound, every shadow. The next morning, I found tracks around my campsite. Lots of them. Circling my tent in a spiral pattern that grew tighter and tighter toward the center. But they weren't quite right. The shape was human. Heel, arch, toe. But the depth was inconsistent, and the spacing suggested a stride that was too long, too regular. Something had circled my tent for hours while I lay inside, and I'd never heard a sound. That should have been when I turned back. When I headed for the trailhead and civilization and safety. But I was 5 days in, deep in the wilderness. And turning back meant several days of hiking in the direction I'd come from. The direction where I'd seen those things. Moving forward, reaching the loop trail that would eventually take me back to my car seemed like the safer bet. So I kept going, deeper into the wilderness, constantly looking over my shoulder. Day 7. I saw the third one. This time, it was standing in the middle of a stream. I needed to cross, the water flowing around its legs, like it was a stone. Same clothing, same hat, same wrong posture, but this one was different in a way I couldn't initially identify. Then I realized it was wearing skin over its clothing. Not clothing made of skin, but actual skin. Draped over the dark fabric like a coat. I could see where it hung loose around the wrists, where the edges didn't quite match up, where the color was slightly off. Human skin. My stomach lurched. I had to grip a tree to keep from falling as vertigo washed over me. This wasn't some weird hiker. This wasn't a hermit with odd mannerisms. This was something else. Something that wore people. The figure raised its arm, the motion stiff and experimental, like it was testing the range of movement, and pointed at me. Just pointed, holding the position with that same unnatural stillness. The skin on its arm was loose, sliding slightly on whatever was underneath, bunching at the wrist like an ill-fitting glove. I didn't run this time. Some deep survival instinct told me that running would mark me as prey. Instead, I carefully backed away, maintaining eye contact with those flat, empty eyes, moving slowly and deliberately until I was out of sight. Then I allowed myself to move faster. Not quite running, but close, putting distance between myself and that thing in the stream. That night, I didn't make camp in the traditional sense. I climbed a tree, a large pine with branches strong enough to support my weight, and lashed myself to the trunk with rope. I didn't risk a fire. I ate a protein bar in silence and darkness, and I waited for dawn. They came at midnight. I heard them before I saw them. Multiple sets of footsteps moving through the forest below. Not trying to be quiet, not anymore. They walked in a grid pattern, methodical and thorough, searching. I counted at least 6 distinct sources of footsteps, maybe more. Then they entered the small clearing below my tree, and I got my first clear look at them by moonlight. They were man-shaped, roughly 6.5 feet tall, wearing those same dark clothes. But now I could see what the clothes were. Not fabric, but something organic, something that moved and flexed like living tissue. And over that, some of them wore skin, human skin, badly fitted, hanging loose in some places and stretched tight in others. But others had removed their skin coats, and I could see what they really were underneath. They were not human. They were not animal. They were something else entirely. Their true bodies were pale, almost translucent, covered in something that looked like cartilage or very thin bone. They had too many joints in their limbs. Their heads were smooth and featureless, except for those flat. Painted on faces that I now understood were masks. Thin layers of material pressed over whatever their actual faces looked like. One of them bent down, examining the ground where I'd been walking earlier. It touched the dirt, brought its fingers to its face. I watched in horror, pressed its fingertips against its mouth hole, tasting my trail, learning my scent. Another one made a sound. The first sound I'd heard any of them make. It was like wind through a hollow tube, modulated into something almost like speech. The others turned toward it, their movements synchronized, and they all looked up at the trees. Not at my tree specifically, just up, searching. I held perfectly still, barely breathing, pressing myself against the trunk. My rope creaked softly with my movement, and I froze. One of them tilted its head, listening. It took a step toward my tree. Then another sound from the forest. A branch breaking, some animal moving through the undergrowth. All 6 figures turned toward the sound and began moving in that direction, their hunting formation reforming. Within minutes, they'd vanished back into the darkness. I stayed in that tree until dawn, too terrified to move. My muscles screaming from maintaining the same position for hours. When gray light finally filtered through the branches, and I was reasonably sure they'd moved on, I climbed down on shaking legs. I found what they'd been hunting about a quarter mile from my tree. The deer was still alive when I found it, but barely. They'd taken its skin. Not all of it, just sections, removed with surgical precision. The animal was in shock, making small whimpering sounds, its eyes rolling with pain and terror. I've never been a hunter, never had to make decisions about animal suffering, but I couldn't let it continue like that. I used my knife, quick and as merciful as I could manage, and then I stumbled away from the body and vomited into the bushes. They were practicing, learning, testing how to remove skin more efficiently, and they were wearing it, studying how it moved, how it fit, how to make themselves look more convincing. They were becoming better at pretending to be human. Day 8, Day 9, Day 10. I moved as fast as I could, sleeping in trees, eating while walking, taking risks on steep terrain just to cover more ground. I saw them at a distance several times, always watching, always following, never attacking directly, but never leaving me alone. On day 11, I found the cabin. It wasn't on any map, wasn't supposed to exist in this section of wilderness. Just an old structure, probably built by some hermit or hunter decades ago, mostly collapsed, but with one room still intact. The door hung on broken hinges. The windows were empty of glass. But it was shelter, and more importantly, I could defend it better than an open campsite. I made a fire in what remained of the fireplace. I ate a real meal. I tried to convince myself that I'd only have to survive 3 more days until I reached the trailhead. Then I found the photographs. They were scattered on the floor, water-damaged and faded, but still legible. Polaroids, mostly, dated to the 1970s and 80s. Photos of people. Hikers, hunters, campers. Normal wilderness photos. People smiling at the camera, posing with their gear, celebrating reaching a summit. But something was wrong with them. In some photos, the proportions were slightly off. Arms a bit too long, legs at odd angles. In others, you could see seams at the wrists and neck, places where skin didn't quite match. And in a few, if you looked closely at the eyes, you could see they were flat. Empty, not quite right. They'd been here for decades. These things. Watching people, studying them, learning how to pass. Getting better at it with each attempt. I started going through the cabin more thoroughly. In a rotted-out trunk, I found journals. Multiple journals from different people, spanning years. I didn't have time to read them all, but I skimmed a few entries. June 15, 1973. They followed me for 3 days before I figured out what they were. Marcus thinks I'm crazy, but I know what I saw. They don't move right. They don't breathe right. They're wearing us. August 3, 1981. Found another skin. Just lying there on a rock, like they'd discarded it after practice. It still had the face. I knew him. Steve Coleman from the ranger station. He went missing last month. October 27th, 1987. I understand now. They're not trying to hurt us. Not exactly. They want to be us. They watch and learn and practice until they can pass. Then they take someone's place. Walk out of the woods wearing a stolen face and step back into civilization. How many of them are out there already? How many of our neighbors and friends and family members are actually these things? Wearing human skins they've learned to operate convincingly. That last entry had no date after it. The journal simply ended. I sat there as the fire burned low, understanding settling over me like cold water. They were patient. They were learning. And they'd been practicing on wilderness travelers for at least 50 years, probably longer. How many had they succeeded with? How many times had something walked out of these woods, wearing a stolen identity, integrated itself into human society, watched and learned from the inside? Outside, I heard footsteps. Multiple sources, circling the cabin. I reinforced the door as best I could with debris. I kept my fire burning. I gripped my knife and waited. They didn't try to break in. They just walked in circles around the cabin, all night long, those measured. Inhuman steps, crunching through leaves and snapping twigs. Sometimes one of them would stop at a window and stand there, just out of the firelight, and I knew they were watching me, studying, learning how a frightened human behaves, how we move when we're scared, how we try to make ourselves look bigger, more threatening. Dawn came. and they melted back into the forest. I didn't waste time. I grabbed what supplies I could carry and ran. Actually ran. Abandoning all caution, racing through the forest toward where I hoped the trailhead would be. I didn't care about the noise. I didn't care about strategy. I just needed to get out. I saw them several more times that day, always at a distance, always watching. Sometimes they'd match my speed, jogging alongside me in the trees with that disturbing, too, smooth gait. Sometimes they'd get ahead of me and stand blocking the trail, forcing me to detour around them. They were hurting me, playing with me, or maybe testing how much fear a human could endure before breaking. On day 12, I reached the trailhead parking lot. My car was there, exactly where I'd left it, covered in 2 weeks of forest debris. I fumbled with my keys, hands shaking so badly I dropped them twice. I kept expecting to feel a hand on my shoulder, to turn around and see one of them standing there. But the parking lot was empty. I got in the car, locked the doors, started the engine, and only then, with barriers of metal and glass between me and the forest, did I allow myself to look back. They were there, all of them. Maybe a dozen figures standing at the tree line, perfectly still, watching me leave. Some wore the skin coats, some didn't. But all of them were absolutely motionless, like a photograph, like mannequins, like things that had never been alive. I drove away, hands clenched on the steering wheel, not allowing myself to relax until I hit the highway, until I was surrounded by other cars and people and civilization. That was 4 months ago. I've tried to go back to normal life. I returned to my apartment, to my job, to my routine. I told people I'd had a good trip, that the wilderness had been healing, that I felt better. I smiled and lied and pretended, but I can't stop watching people now. Can't stop looking for the tells, movements that are slightly wrong, the eyes that don't quite focus, skin that seems to sit loose on the bones beneath. I catch myself staring at strangers, analyzing their gait, their posture, their expressions. Sometimes I see things that make me doubt. A coworker who stands too still. A cashier whose smile doesn't quite reach her eyes. A neighbor who I've never seen blink.
Are they just tired?
Distracted. Anxious. Or are they something else? Something that learned to pass. That walked out of the woods wearing someone else's face. I've tried to report what I saw. The rangers were polite but dismissive. Wildlife can seem threatening when you're alone, son. The mind plays tricks. The police were less polite, unless you have evidence of a crime. We can't investigate campfire stories. No one takes me seriously. No one wants to believe. But I know what I saw. And I know they're still out there, in the deep wilderness, watching and learning and practicing. Getting better at mimicry with each attempt. Perfecting the art of wearing human skin. And I know that sometimes, when they're ready, they walk out of the forest and into our world. Last week I saw one at the grocery store. I'm almost certain. It was standing in the produce section, holding an apple, studying it with that flat, empty gaze. Its movements were better than the ones in the forest. Smoother, the more natural. But there was something off about the way it picked up the fruit, the way it turned its head to examine the label. Our eyes met, just for a second, and I saw something in that gaze, not quite recognition, but maybe awareness. The knowledge that I knew, that I'd seen what they really were. Then it smiled, a perfect, practiced smile, and placed the apple in its basket and walked away. Its gait was nearly perfect, nearly human, but not quite, not yet. I didn't follow it, didn't confront it. What would I even say? What could I do? Call the police and report someone for walking slightly wrong. I'd sound insane. So I finished my shopping and went home and locked my doors and tried to sleep. But I dream about them now, about those figures in the forest, circling my tent, studying me while I slept, about the journals in that cabin, the decades of accounts documenting their patient infiltration, about how many of them might already be among us, wearing faces we'd recognize, living lives stolen from people who went into the wilderness and never came back. They're patient, they're learning, and they're everywhere. Look around you. Really look. Watch how people move, how they stand when they think no one's watching, how their expressions shift, how their eyes focus, how their skin sits on their bones. And if you see something that's not quite right, someone who moves too smoothly, who stands too still, who seems to be wearing their own face like a mask, don't stare too long. Don't let them know you've noticed. Because if they think you know what they are, if they believe you've seen through their carefully practiced disguise, they might decide you're too dangerous to leave walking around. Or worse, they might decide you're the perfect one to study, to follow, to learn from, to become. I'm writing this as both warning and confession. If something happens to me, if I disappear or start acting differently, if the people who know me notice I'm not quite myself anymore, this document might explain why. The wilderness holds many things: beauty, peace, healing, but it also holds them, and they're watching, always watching, learning to be us.